Come on.
They're right there!
Let's go. Move, 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 move.
This episode of Choices Not Chances podcast is sponsored by Louisiana Gun Shop, located on Highway 90 West in Broussard, Louisiana, just south of Lafayette. For more information, stay tuned at the end of this episode.
So I have been told that I have to say that my opinions are mine alone and do not represent the United States Special Operations Command, the Marine Corps Forces Special Operations Command, the Department of Defense, or really anybody else. So that's all.
This is Choices Not Chances podcast with Ryan and Matt. I'm your co-host, Matthew Schrett. Sitting next to me is Ryan Rogers. Ryan.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Choices Not Chances, and I've got a good one for you today. It's my privilege and my honor to bring you this episode with Mr. John Dailey. He's a United States Marine Corps retired Master Sergeant. He's a Marine grunt. He's a scout sniper. He's a graduate of Ranger School. He's a Force Reconnaissance leader and a leader of the first Force team that were in contact out of the entire Marine Corps in the Afghanistan campaign. John was instrumental in the development of Det One, or simply the Det, which became MARSOC later on. We talk about a myriad of different topics, ranging from when the Berlin Wall came down during his time in Budapest on MSG, and John's thoughts on Ranger School. We briefly discussed Jeff Cooper's Color Code and the way that the mind works under full stress or cognitive load. John will forever maintain the status and be a giant amongst his community. When Raider Battalion is brought up, his name goes right along with it, and his attitude, personality, and humble abode, like when he's been here with me during this interview, have been straight up awesome. Somebody that is an impressive person. John is an example in the Marine Corps of what right looks like. He has a Substack called Think, Read, Write, Repeat at jdailey.substack.com, and an upcoming Substack called Ruck the Fuck Up at rtfu.substack.com. John also is going to be releasing a book in 2024, and pre-sales for that book on Amazon are going to be right around the first of the year, coming up for pre-sales for his new book called Tough, Rugged Bastard. So make sure you put it in your box, put it in your reminder, and I hope you enjoy this episode as much as we enjoyed making it. John Dailey, thanks for coming to the show, man.
Ryan, Matt, happy to be here.
Absolutely. And so I just start by saying we talked offline, but I first, started hearing about you through Mark Arrington, who I know from up at the Post, and have done 2 or 3 different recordings with him on here, and your name always comes up as somebody I need to look into, somebody I need to research. And so I started looking at your Substacks, and I love them. I can't wait for the book to come out, and we'll talk about all of that. Talked about a little bit of it in the intro, but before we get to where you are now in life, I want to start in the beginning. So if we could talk about where you come from, who you come from, brothers, sisters, religion, things like that in the child rearing years, that'd be great.
Certainly. Yeah, I was born way the hell back in 1969. Just shortly after the Summer of Love, man landed on the moon, all of that.
Yeah.
Grew up in very close to the West Virginia border, and lived, my life on both sides of it at various times. But great childhood, very close-knit family. We talked a little bit about that. With one brother and a sister, both younger. My dad was a Navy vet who was during Vietnam on a sub-tender. High school sweethearts, pretty much, with my mom. So I was born at a relatively, they were relatively young.
Okay.
And, from there, huge, extended family, cousins, things like that really went tight. And we were talking about religion. We didn't start as a really religious family, but they found religion when I was like 5 or 6 years old and really got into it.
Sure.
No, it was a little older than that. I was probably 8 or 9. And So my life growing up was really family and religion were the driving factors in it. And, honestly, by the time I was turning, I got into high school, I knew from a pretty early age that I wanted to join the Marine Corps.
Okay.
I was, like, the day I remember it was the 4th of July, right, in 1976. And it was the bicentennial, of the nation, so it was a huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
And Dad took us to a parade in town, and there was, sitting around, and this guy comes by, a Marine, in his dress blues, and I was like, asked my dad, I'm like, hey, what is that guy? And it was less the guy and more the way that I could kind of see the kind of reverence in my dad's face, even though he kind of talked a little smack about Marines, right, being jarheads or leathernecks or whatever. But I was like, I need to look into this. So I went, to the library and got like a first book I could about Marines, and kind of knew, from then on that was what I was going to do. And then when I got into, my parents got divorced and wound up moving into West Virginia. And when I got into high school, kind of found the Marine recruiter, and he was a Force Recon Marine who had been a sniper, and just had this wall of photos, that, everything that I wanted to do.
All the cool stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was sold. I was, begging to sign up, well before I was old enough. So my parents didn't give any objection to, because they know they've been kind of inoculated to the fact that I was coming in for years. So at 17, they signed the papers, and as soon as I graduated high school, I was gone.
Check. Now, if we could go back just a little bit, I assume you played team sports or some kind of sports growing up?
I did a lot of baseball. Loved baseball. I always wanted to play football. I was, a little short kid, so my mom wouldn't let me. But when I got in high school, I played baseball, wrestled, ran cross country and track.
Okay.
And really, all of those, the wrestling, the cross country, and track, were because I thought they would better prepare me for boot camp, right, for joining the Marine Corps.
100%. I really wish I would have ran some track before I came in. I had to learn long distance running, 3-mile long distance running when I came in. That's great. Do you think that team sports helped you as a teammate to your teams later in life? I mean, I'm sure the answer is yes there, but how much do team sports in the youth years help the mindset of being part of a team later?
I mean, it's obviously not critical, because there are plenty of successful people that don't play team sports, but I think it's hugely helpful. Mm-hmm. It seems to me, because I continue to work with youngish Marines, that there's less of that. There's a lot more people that weren't raised playing sports, and I think it's certainly detrimental, unless you consider online gaming or whatever a team sport. And maybe there's some value in that. I don't know, but for me it was huge. Your ability to work with others, your ability to particularly in team sports, to say that, hey, I don't need to be the superstar, or I can, they got to pass the ball to the guy who's got the shot, or the team is stronger than the individual. I think that's the key takeaway for me too. Is at a young age, if you learn that team atmosphere, especially when you get into a squad or like you get into smaller teams later in your career, that's huge. Not having the one superstar that carries the team, because in a team setting, it's a team. One person's not going to run it. Yeah. I also think that just learning how not only to lead peers at a young age, but also to follow peers, because you're not just going to come in to a job, a career, whether it be in business or in the military. You're not just going to come in being the leader. And you're going to have to learn how to follow people and learn, that humility of following peers. I think is important as well. Yeah, and that's certainly as an enlisted guy, and that's one of the biggest problems that officers face. When they step into a young lieutenant steps into a platoon in charge, with absolutely relatively zero experience.
Yep.
All right, and they do a good job of training them,
Sure.
preparing them, but I mean that's a wildly challenging role to set of shoes to fill, to step in when you've got a platoon sergeant that's
15 years in.
right? Yeah, tons of, especially over the last 20 years, where he's got a ton of combat experience.
Yeah.
He's telling you one thing, and if you disagree with that, you're in charge, right?
Yeah,
Everything
yeah.
that you do, your team does or fails to do is your responsibility ultimately.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so going back, you said at the younger age when you seen this Marine and his blues and the reverence that maybe the poise or the command of spirit, whatever it is, that strikes you and you want to know more about that. You enlist. Between that time of enlisting, did you look into any other services, or were you like, nope, that's what I want to be?
I only because I didn't know about it's when so I'm a kid in the 80s, right? So Rambo, everything, you see a lot about the Green Berets, right? From the John Wayne movie to Arnold Schwarzenegger, is a Chuck Norris. They're all, for the most part, they're all Army. So I definitely looked into Army Special Operations. A lot of the books, one of the first hardcover books I remember buying was called Inside the Green Berets. I still have it, and I was like, just all these stories about Vietnam, and I was like, enthralled with that. But then I learned about Force Recon, and it was like, hey, the Marine Corps has the same sort of unit that kind of operates behind enemy lines, does cool stuff. So that was, from then on, there was never a question.
Check. And so, walk me through the beginning of your career. We'll just start there. I'm not even going to ask questions. Right, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, not as auspicious as all of that. Though I spent a lot of time, like I said, running track. I was very physically fit. Very capable. Went to boot camp at Paris Island and did well there. No issues. I really loved. I loved everything about it. No issues with the discipline, being told what to do, getting yelled at. I just kind of thrived in that environment. Then I came to infantry school here at Camp Lejeune. It was called ITS at the time. It was right before they made the change to SOI.
Check.
And while I was there, we had the opportunity to try out for recon, and so we went out. Consisted of a bunch of running, bunch of rucking, and then they took us eventually to the pool. And that was, I don't know how, that was the one part of it I wasn't prepared for.
The swimming?
The swimming, yeah. I assumed I could swim because we jump in lakes and streams and rivers and paddle around, and I hadn't drowned, so I was pretty competent. But we jumped in and they're like, hey, cross stroke 500 meters, or I'm like, I don't know how to do a cross stroke. I only know like a modified breaststroke, a dog paddle, really. So, I made it all the way up to the end of that and passed out or came close to passing out. I think the jury's still out, but I got yanked out of the pool, and they're like, hey, man, you're gonna have to try again later.
Yeah.
And it this is one of the times in life when like somebody was kind of watching out for you or guiding something. So I went from here out to Camp Pendleton and joined 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines.
Okay.
And right when I was checking in, my orders were to weapons company, and I was in 0311. So I go to check in, and they're like, hey, why are you here? You're not you shouldn't be in a weapons company. And the solution that they came up with was to put me in the stay platoon, the sniper platoon, which was the only place that 0311s existed in weapons company. And that pissed everybody off because in order to, and it's still the same today, I guess, you generally do your time as a grunt, and then you try out, and so I got thrust right into weapons company. Everybody, or into the sniper platoon. Everybody hated me.
I was gonna say, I bet that makes for an uncomfortable
it did
beginning.
So we had they were just getting ready to start a regimental in-house sniper school. So they're like, hey, you got to go to this, and we'll see how you do. If you do poorly, we'll chicane you, and you can go somewhere else. So I was motivated. Like I said, my recruiter had just had these pictures of when he was in sniper school, guys in their ghillie suits. He told me all these stories, and the one shot, one kill. Hathcock's book had come out. I don't even know if his book had come out yet, but I read like reviews about it, and I was like, this is really what I wanted to do in the Marine Corps, was be a sniper. Mm-hmm. So I kind of just...
Well, that kind of worked out for you.
Perfectly, yeah.
Yeah.
I like threw everything into that, and at the time, the one thing that I had going for me was like I had a memory, like I could remember anything. Tell me once, I remembered it. That goes away with blasts.
Oh yeah,
concussions and TBIs and everything else, and age.
Yeah,
but
no doubt.
But at the time, I could just I memorized everything, all the data, gun data, all the everything that we had to know. So I wound up doing relatively well in the course. They let me stay, and we deploy, and I eventually win guys over.
Now, you went to school to be a hog?
Not then, not yet.
So you're a pig in
a pig. It was an in-house, they call it regimental sniper school, to decide who would get quotas to go.
Right. Makes sense.
So I go on deployment, return from deployment, and should have been kind of racked and stacked as one of the next guys to go to sniper school. But the Marine Corps at the time, and this is 88, decides that they were going to redesignate 3rd Battalion 7th Marines, or make 1-4, who was up in Twin Nine Palms, 3-7. And they were going to move 7th Marines. So we had been stationed at Pendleton at Camp Mateo. Mm-hmm. So basically we're homeless, right? We don't have a job, so we have to find somewhere, or the Marine Corps will find somewhere for us to go. So I went to the 5th Marines Regimental Scouts and begged a job. I don't think we have Regimental Scouts anymore, but went there, kind of tried out for them, and they took me in, and I got the opportunity to go to sniper school.
Oh yeah.
From there.
Oh yeah. Now talk about that. I don't want you to give away any kind of anything to hitters coming up, but whatever you can say about it. I know that's a challenging school, and the attrition rate's kind of ridiculous, right? So
it is, and it doesn't really matter because it doesn't exist anymore.
Well, yeah. I got some buddies that are chapped asses about that.
Yeah, most of the decisions the commandant's made, I've agreed with on a lot of things. That's one that I'm
wishy-washy about it too on that one, and the big reason is, look, I like the fact that there's drones that cost dollars, not blood, that we can send out to do a sniper mission, both armed drones and unarmed drones. They can go out, they can reconnoiter, they can send great intelligence back, they can even kill. But my reserve is there's always workarounds. So now drones have taken over the battlefield. Check. But at some point, there will be a workaround. There'll be a direct energy weapon. There'll be some kind of EMP weapon. And drones are going to fall out of the sky. And then what? We don't have a sniper school anymore? We don't have the trade craft and the lineage that goes back? That's what I worry about.
And it's the exact same boat. It's been the case over since the highlights of the war that, commanders are... people are not willing to assume as much risk. Mm-hmm. So definitely sending a small 2-man team out, alone in a city or in the jungle, is just not something that's likely to get approved anymore. So sniper school was. I think the intangibles that come out of it are worth, even if we never employed them. I learned more during that course about small unit leadership, small unit teamwork, about yourself. That's one of the courses where you really you gotta
find yourself.
Say, hey, do I am I willing to do this thing to get what I want? And I had it was a little bit of an unusual experience in the school because I had my team leader from 3rd Battalion 7th Marines, when they got redesignated, he went to sniper school to be an instructor. The guy from one of the instructors from 5th Marines had been my team leader at 5th Marines. So I had these two guys who were invested in my success, but also had to be adamant that I got the full training effect. Right?
Yeah.
So
They weren't putting out a bad product in one of
No.
the people they knew. Yeah.
yeah, so I think the most worrisome time, and I did relatively well again because I had this memory where I could just regurgitate whatever. So writing orders, a lot of the tests were, and we realized that it's not the best way to teach things now, but a lot of it was just memorization of definitions. The Marine Corps loves that, even though it really serves no real value in proving that somebody understands something. But surveillance, surveillance, the all-weather day and night systematic observation of the entire battlefield area for intelligence gathering purposes. That had to be the definition.
Now you know.
A map. A map is a picture, graphic representation of the Earth's surface, a portion thereof depicting or showing natural man-made terrain features as seen from above drum scale. Like that was, and those, I can't remember what I had for breakfast, but those things are still like beaten.
Ingrained.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I had a great time at school, but the rifle qual, we shot back to 1,000 with, moving targets at 800 or up and down targets out to 800. And I'm shooting along, doing pretty well, and then suddenly I'm getting misses. Misses at the 800, and then back at and I think there was a total of 25 shots. In the way it was scored, you had to have 20 hits. Mm-hmm. And I'm back to like the last shot, and I've got like 19 hits, and I'm like, this is a perfect shot. Right, the target goes down, it comes up, and there's like the little wave that I missed. And so I go sit in the corner by myself. I'm like, what the hell? We get back to the barracks, and they're like, hey, Dailey, go pack your shit and find a ride home because you're done.
Oh shit.
So I go and I stuff everything in my sea bag. I go into the head, like into the stall, and I'm like crying. Right? This is what I wanted to do forever. And finally, I come out, I grab my sea bag, they let me get down to the curb, and then, like, the windows all open, and everybody's just laughing their asses off. They're like, yeah, dude, you shot a 23 or 24 or whatever. I shot pretty well.
They were just fucking with you.
They were fucking with me. And that's one of the...
That's bad, man, because it crushed you.
It was bad. It almost crushed my soul, all right? I was, they were lucky I didn't, decide to take my bootlaces.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's
But it was. That course meant the world to me. Being able to do that, to kind of put myself as a small part of the lineage of guys like Carlos Hathcock and Chuck Mulaney and snipers, across time. So that was something I was really proud of. Always will be.
Yeah, that's outstanding. I have a couple of hog friends that it is one of the achievements of their life, one of the proudest things. It's inked up on them, wherever it is, and because it's one of those things. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not, everybody can't do it. Doesn't matter if you can shoot or not. Everybody can't do that. It reminds me of one of your Substacks about through the cave lies the things that you want. Or I know that wasn't exactly how you had it, but when I was listening to your Substack on that, it's true. Anything that's worth anything is going to be trials and tribulations and turns, and that's awesome. I'm glad you got to do that. That's something that in my life I probably would have enjoyed that. I just never came to it. I had a chance at Recon. They had just given me my first squad in 3-2, and then they kind of voluntold me to go over and do this NDOC. And I crushed the NDOC, and they invited me to RIP, and I was like, nah. All I ever wanted to be was a squad leader in the infantry, and you're going to make me go into Recon NDOC pipeline and get fucked with for the next 2 years. Or I could lead a squad into Iraq. I'm going to take that,
Yeah.
You look back on it, and you're like, was that the right decision? If I went that route, where would that route have taken me in 2005? Yeah. Because then MARSOC stood up in 2006. They take a lot of recon people from that, so who knows what would have happened? Might even not even be here,
Yeah,
so
chances are
crazy.
You may be. You might be in a grave, right?
That's what I'm saying.
No way of knowing, and that's one of the things that I've always been fascinated by. Is we hit, and you don't a lot of times recognize them at the moment, but you hit these forks in the road, and it's whichever one you take, you're never going to find out what was down the other road, right? But I feel like whoever was looking over me, I've made the right choices in some of those, or the choice was made for me.
Sure.
In some of those cases.
Yeah.
You know, I had a pretty charmed, you know, certainly career in the Marine Corps and life. I feel like, you know, but a lot of it also, like the title of the podcast, right, comes down to the choices.
Yeah.
Right, making the hard choice, you know, being willing to do things that fewer people are willing to do.
Sure. Sure, absolutely. So after you become a hog, you come back to your unit. I'm sure that's a big thump your chest. You know, because when you come back to your unit and you didn't pass that school, I've seen those guys too, and they come back and it's not like a proud moment for them. It's hurt. You know, it's somebody that, you know, usually they put out 100% effort to make it. Like you said, it's all they ever wanted, and then boom, they get crushed. Got to come back to, you know, what they consider the regular, you know, situation that's not as good, not where they wanted to go. But the guys that come back, they're on, you know, that passed it, they're on cloud nine. There's a different confidence and reverence about them. So that's dope. When you come back to your unit, what do you experience?
So I was, like I said, I was in the 5th Marine Regimental Scouts, and that consisted of 6 Marines. There was only, actually at the time, one of them had left to be a sniper school instructor, so there were 5 of us. There were 3 Marines, my, you know, corporals, kind of my grade, and then we had 2 sergeants. One of the sergeants was a sniper, and nobody else was. So when I come back, I became the assistant chief scout, you know, of the regiment, which, you know, seemed really, really cool. But we didn't do a lot. Right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, and this is, at this point, we're 1989, and so I kind of bum around there for a while, and I was like, man, there's just, we kind of show up. I'm sitting in an office, and we're you know, if they did regimental level exercises and training events and things like that, we would go out, but that was relatively rare. You know, we would put on an annual regimental sniper school, internal school, to like the same thing that I had gone through. So all the battalions could come to it and, you know, get as many people as possible into it. So I helped run that, but then I was, you know, reading the little base paper, and they're like, hey, we need people for Marine security guard duty at embassies. Okay. And I was like, you know, I don't know anything about it, but I was at a barracks party, and the career planner, you know, I wound up talking to him, and he's like, oh yeah, MSG duty, you should do it. He's like, as a sniper, you know, you'll probably be working for the CIA, you'll be doing all sorts of cool stuff. And I was like, bet. I'm like, sign me up. So of course he had no idea what he was talking about, right? So I go to the school, which is another, I mean, a very high attrition school.
And what's the attrition come from there?
There, it's really at the time. So this was, you know, right after Clayton Lone Tree, the Marine, had sold unwittingly and started like selling information to a Russian honeypot gal.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So it really came down to the board at the end. Like, you would go through the whole course. There was, you know, some attrition. There was a lot of shooting, a lot of pistol marksmanship. That was more challenging than you would expect. A lot of it met all the FBI, followed the FBI standards. So wheel gun, we were shooting a 357.
That's pretty sweet.
A lot of shotgun. Yeah, it was
I was
cool.
going to say shotguns you had too, right?
Yeah, tons of time on the range, some M14 and different things. But, I mean, none of it was horribly challenging, but it came down to this board at the end. Okay. And it was just a huge, you know, State Department people and colonels and everything on this board. And it was ruthless. I mean, they would try to fluster you. So they would ask, you know, if you're divorced, about your parents, and if your parents were cheating on the other, and just anything to kind of get at you and see if they could provoke.
It's just a psychology
response.
thing.
It was. I think it's mostly that you need to, you know, you have an American citizen or somebody at the, you know, screaming at you, you know, because they lost their passport, or they think it's their right to come in, or whatever the case is, and you know, you need to be polite. You need to. So you know, we just stood in line for days, and, you know, somebody would go in, they would come out and with their head down, and there was probably at least 25% of the class got dropped during that.
Right there.
And that was right at the end. So, you know, I went in, and one of the things I've always, believed as a leader is that, you got to make training more challenging than combat, right? And I've been through sniper school. I've been yelled at. A room full of suits, yelling at me and like, easy day.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I did manage to do okay during that, getting him laughing a little bit, and so I wound up going to the embassy in Budapest, Hungary, which was cool. It was a communist country still, so we were limited on what we could, where we could go, who we could. There were 2-man like integrity rules for libo buddy policies and things like that.
Sure.
But it was a really tight-knit community between the American embassy, the British, the Canadians, Aussies. So it was a lot of fun. Got to see Europe, which I had never done. And I was over there like at the time that the wall came down, so it was a really interesting time in history.
Yeah, I was going to say, how was that over there?
It was, so when I got there, Hungary was kind of the first, right? They like cut their wire symbolically. They kicked the Russians out. And so I got there right as that was happening.
Okay.
So the Hungarians were like, hey man, we're, a democracy now, let's be friends. And I'm like, well, but we haven't caught up with that yet. And then the wall came down, or I had to get the timeline, but I had the opportunity to go to Berlin to Checkpoint Charlie and like chunk off big, pieces of the wall.
Oh, yeah?
When that was kind of the thing.
Oh, wow.
So it was a really good time. The duty was not incredibly interesting. I mean, you're a security guard.
Yeah, but
a mall cop.
You do get to work with State Department and such, right?
Oh, yeah.
When you're doing that, so
Yeah,
there's
you
some benefit to it.
And a lot of people, after that experience will get out and go that route, diplomatic security, things like that. So I was there for a year and then went to, and that's where I met my wife.
In Budapest.
In Budapest.
Okay.
An American school teacher from Pennsylvania, but she was working there.
Huh.
So we met. I left Budapest, went to Buenos Aires to the embassy, and was there for a year and a half. And
It sounds like a terrible time.
yeah, horrible. But so she came to visit, and then just interviewed, got a job at the school there. So
beautiful.
We were there. You're not allowed to be married, right? During that time, so
Yeah,
we
yeah.
were dating. She had to live out in town. I had to live in the Marine House. But that was when the first Gulf War was going on. So I missed out, and felt really shitty
Yeah.
about that fact that there was a war going on.
And you're a sniper, and you're at MSG missing it.
Yes. Yeah, it
I
was
know that
bad.
feeling.
It was-
Not exactly,
Right.
but with Iraq, I felt the same way. I went, nothing was popping anymore because I was like 06. Came home from that bummed. Like,
Yeah.
I went to combat, I was there, and nobody would fight us, kind of thing, pop shots and IDs. But I understand the sentiment of, it's going on, but it's not going on for me, Yeah.
Yeah, so I would, while I was there, I would go in every day to the embassy, fill out an AA form, which we still did by administrative action form by hand, and put, hey, I want to be reassigned to a fleet unit, and give that to my boss, who was a staff sergeant, and he would basically tear it up and throw it in the trash because it wasn't going to do any good. But in early 91, or it would have been mid 91, President Bush, the senior, came to visit. And somebody, the regional security officer at the embassy or whatever, told them, they're like, hey, so there's this guy Dailey that won't stop bitching about going to war. All right, so we get the opportunity to meet, we're all in our blues. We get to shake the president's hand, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And he let there's cameras, photographers, news people like taking photos and shaking our hands and whatnot, and he lets them all like go into the conference room where he's going to talk, and he comes back, which is the Secret Service agent, and he's like, hey, which one of you is Dailey? And I was like,
oh
"Me,
shit."
sir." He's like just stop. He's like, stop asking. Your job here is very important. You're not going to Iraq. And I'm like, I guess that's pretty final, all right?
Yeah.
But which was the coolest, probably still like the coolest memory I have. He like kind of leaned in, we all like leaned in, and he was like, we're going to nail that son of a bitch. And I like, having the president, tell you that, I was like, that's pretty cool. So,
that's very cool.
So I shut up and colored and did my time, and it wasn't, it wasn't horrible, hanging out in Buenos Aires.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Argentine steak and, swimming in the swimming pool.
It's not combat, but it's
it's
not horrible.
If I wasn't going to be in combat, it was a pretty good second choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I wonder, and I talk to a lot of guys, and it seems like when those things happen in somebody's career, it's almost like a blessing when they look back on it later. Like for me going to Iraq and having a duller deployment as a corporal, junior, unexperienced squad leader, getting that time.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say that I hated that this happened, but it built me in this way for later when this happened, kind of thing. Do you feel that way, or is it just like, it's kind of on vacation chilling?
No, I guess. I mean, the reality of the first Gulf War was that not a lot happened. I mean, there was a whole lot of sitting in the desert. Chances are very good that that's really all they would have done. Sitting in the desert wearing Mop 3, kind of waiting on something to happen. There were, when I came back from that, seeing Lance Corporals walking around with with 2 rows of ribbons or something, which at the time was like unheard of. Having like a overseas sea service deployment, and that was troubling. Right? But
why?
It's
just competition spirited.
Yeah, that thing being I was a sergeant, by this point, and I'm checking into a state platoon as the chief scout. And there's young guys that have got more ribbons than I do, who've been in combat and I haven't. So that's especially the combat action ribbon. You kind of feel undeserving of the position of, even though I was trained obviously as a sniper and they weren't. But
almost like that imposter syndrome.
Exactly. And I talk in my writing a ton about that. And in many cases somebody had a LinkedIn post today that I commented on where they're talking about imposter syndrome. I think maybe it was Instagram, but I think it's beneficial to a large degree, right? That's and that's what their post was taught about, that having imposter syndrome pushes you to prove yourself every day, right? Which I'm a huge proponent of. But I think the other side of it, and I think that maybe more now because as you get older, you start to, at the point when you realize that you don't know everything, you quickly realize that you don't know much. And that's kind of, the definition of or at least the beginning of wisdom, right? When you're like, hey man,
I know nothing.
I know nothing, I think I know a lot of stuff, but I'm willing to, you can change my mind, right?
Sure.
I hold strong opinions, but hold them loosely, right? Be willing to learn from everybody that you meet.
Everybody, yeah. I'm very big on that myself. I maybe don't talk about it enough, but it happened for me in school when I went to college. I'm in college with all these younger, kids and I thought it was just going to be this, I'm the old veteran or whatever. I learned more from them kids and more from those situations and those, not even the school, not even the teacher, but the people and understanding. I don't know anything, man. Everything I thought I knew, I know a lot about a very small slice. And there's all this other stuff out here, that business, acquisitions, marketing, and some of these kids got it down. It's easy for them, and I know nothing about it. And now I'm going into a world where that small slice of the pie that I knew everything about doesn't really apply anymore.
Yeah.
Like the experiences, the trials, the coming of age and the growing, that changed me for the better. But as far as like what I'm able to do for that community,
nobody's going to ask you to draw a range card anymore.
No, there's
dig a fighting position, set up a defense. I mean,
none
of those things. So that, I'm in the same boat, and I was much older when I went back to school in person, right, getting master's degrees, and most of those students were a little bit older too, but I mean, not, I was.
Did you have white on your face?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I may have shaved to try to avoid that.
Bring that younger John to class.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't even really like the beard, but I just hate shaving so much.
Yeah.
You know? So I don't like the big one like yours. I can't do it. But I trim it down every week and then let it go for the week.
There you
go. But I definitely. My wife's always on me to lose it because it takes quite a few years off. But regardless how young they are, they've had just different life experiences.
Sure.
Better, worse, whatever. And that's I'm always been really believe that you can learn like a broken clock is right 2 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
So even when I was a chief scout in 3rd Battalion 7 Marines, this I won't say his name. I doubt he's listening. He's probably dead because he was an idiot. But
right on.
Kid would just do the dumbest things. All right, always doing the dumbest thing, and we punish. Hey, he'd be painting rocks or doing whatever. But rarely, but occasionally, he would come up with a little gem of wisdom. And that's what I didn't invent the saying, but I started using the saying that even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah.
Right. Even the dumbest guy, has
something to offer,
value, right? And your job is just to figure out what it is.
That's huge too in any organization that you're going to either work or be a part of that you care about is like talent management, understanding what your guys like. They might not be great at everything. Find the 1 or 2 things they're great at and then let them, go into that. Same kind of.
I mean, that's leadership principle, right? Employ your unit in accordance with their capabilities and the people, right? If you've got one of the things we talk a lot about is, in special operations, is a lot of what you have to do is work with a partner nation force. And, it's generally assumed in traditional military leadership that the team commander, the team chief, are the guys that go and sit down with the partner nation leadership. But you almost always have, somebody in the team who just gets along with everybody. Right? Doesn't matter if they can speak the language, whatever. And their chances are pretty good that they're not, a younger guy who's who's maybe not great at a lot of other things. But man, I mean, I always insist, bring that guy with you. Set him down, at least make him a part of the circle.
Absolutely.
Right? Because he's the one who's gonna, get things going. He's gonna have people laughing or
Sure.
whatever the case is, and kind of break through the barriers that come with those kind of meetings.
Absolutely. That's great. Okay, so we're what, 90? 91?
We're MSG duty.
Come back from
90,
MSG?
Yeah, 92. And that's, when I come back, I return to 3-7, but now they're in 29 Palms.
Okay.
So I spend not a ton of time there.
And you came back as the chief scout there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm a sergeant at this point. Came back and we had no snipers in the platoon. And so they'd had a kind of a rough go of it, people that had been unsuccessful. And so I got tasked with, like, hey, we need to, run training. We need to prepare people and send people to sniper school. And we had a relatively large number of quotas for the next course coming up. So I jumped on that, just really worked with guys, figured out who were the best candidates, made sure they knew what they were doing, took them down to, trained at 29 Palms, took them down to Pendleton, kind of taught them to stalk down there.
Sure. All inside.
Yeah.
Before going to school. Yeah.
Right. So just prep, and really I think it maybe lessened a little bit over time. Not saying that my sniper course was the last hard course or anything, but it really, and it probably was this way through till the end, that sniper school was a school that you really needed to show up at to demonstrate that you knew what you were doing already. It really wasn't a school to show up and learn.
Where you're learning. Right. Yep, I've heard that.
So that, we got some guys ready, sent them, and they all did really well. And so as a kind of a reward for that, I got the opportunity to try out for Ranger School.
Oh, nice.
Go to Army Ranger School, which was, at the time...
What do you mean try out? Like an NDOC?
So, yeah, we had...
Within the unit or for the Army?
So the 1st Marine Division had 19 quotas, something like that.
Okay.
Just a number of quotas. And they were like, hey, anybody can try out that wants to go to the school. So because we're in 29 Palms, we held an internal tryout. We had a gunner, our battalion gunner, had been to Ranger School back in the day.
Okay.
But at this point, it was a rarity for a Marine hadn't been to Ranger School in years. So nobody even really knew what it was. They were just like, hey, that sounds really badass, so I want to go. So the first day I show up at the screening, there's a couple hundred people standing out there.
A lot of people wanted to go, eh?
Yeah, a lot of people. There's a thing I say a lot is it's to do is better than to be, right? That it's better to. There's lots of people who want to be something, but very few people are willing to do what's necessary to achieve it.
Yeah.
By noon, by the time we broke for lunch, 75% of the people were gone. And then over the next couple of weeks, it just whittled down to, I think maybe 8 or 10 of us. That then got sent down to Pendleton for 2 weeks of getting our asses kicked down there.
Yeah, because the Marine Corps is not going to send anybody that they think's going to fail that, right?
And I've always been able to go really fast, really far with a Recon. Always been pretty speedy, but it came, swimming was still at this point, my weak spot.
They swim in Ranger School?
They don't swim a lot, but they had to. It was mostly recon guys who were left by this point in the tryout, and as part of it, they have a swim test basically to make sure that you can save yourself, and we had to jump in off the 10-meter board and retrieve a 25-pound weight and get it to the surface, and so I'm standing in line watching, and there's recon guys jumping in, and they're not getting the weight to the surface, and they're dropping it, and I'm like, oh man. So I'm like, dude, I can either pass out, or I can, if I pass out, somebody will likely grab me.
Likely.
Hopefully they will. All right, so I black out.
Coming up?
Yeah, coming up, but I had got the weight. I probably just broken the surface. I didn't even know that I'd gotten it above the surface, but I kind of, one of the half kind of blackout things, I come up and I get pulled out, and they're like, damn, you're not a recon. Why aren't you in recon? So I got.
Now wait, so this is like what, 12 feet?
Yeah,
deep?
Like 10 or 12
You're
foot.
going off of that, getting down to the weight, putting it over your head, and then
kicking up to
check
the surface, which was just not something I had ever done.
Right.
Not something I was good at, but I had been working on my swimming a little bit, so I was a little more proficient than I had been. So I got the opportunity to go to Ranger School, and then when you finish that, if you finish that, then they let you go to jump school.
Oh, okay.
So I come back to the unit now, a sniper, a ranger, jump wings.
Got some flair.
Like I'm kind of a big man on campus. And then we deployed, and then I got to go to take the NDOC and go to Force Recon.
Right on.
And
now backing up to Ranger School, what are your thoughts about Ranger School?
It's one of those courses where if you're an infantryman, and it's a lot of people, there's confusion about it. There are the Rangers, the U.S. Army Rangers. The U.S. Army Rangers go to Ranger School, but going to Ranger School does not make you a Ranger from a Ranger band, right? So it's considered to be the Army's premier leadership academy, and it essentially consists of you go into an environment and you go through the mountains, the desert, the jungle, the swamps, and you operate, right? You just do small unit tactics for a couple of weeks in each of those environments. And in each of those environments, you get put into a leadership position. And you've got to motivate, make sure that everything happens while your folks are starving.
Sure.
Not a whole lot of sleep. You get, when I went 1 MRE a day, maybe 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night if you're lucky, and so it's really just a pretty grueling leadership environment and that's where teamwork comes in, because of the 14 days that you're in the field, you might be in charge 2 of those days. So on the days that you're not in charge, if you're a shitty teammate, you're falling asleep, you're whatever, then it's really tough to expect people to operate for you, all right, when you are in charge.
When you're leading, yeah.
So it's really brilliant, right? And it's design. It's simple, but you've got to, it teaches you, that operations are a marathon, not a sprint, right? But you got to be ready to sprint too. Sometimes it's a marathon of sprints, so you've got to take advantage of rest when you can. You've got to not eat all your food at once. You've got to have a little longer term thinking, and then you've got to be a really good teammate. And then you have to be able to motivate people that are and sometimes that means kicking them in the head. Sometimes that means patting them on the back, or something in between. But you've got to, as a leader, you've got to be able to recognize who your heavy hitters are, how to use them, and then how to get the best out of the people who are
sure.
Or
did you did the other candidates know that you were a Marine or know who was Marines? Like when you guys check in, are you checking in service uniform or?
Yeah, they did. We had to, in fact, at that point in Marine Corps history, we didn't wear name tags that said U.S. Marines, right? But we had to go get them sewn on. So
they would know?
So, I think so the instructors would know. But this was back in the woodland cami days, right? Yep. We had, our name and U.S. Marines.
Oh, so you wore your regular camis over there for that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what everybody wore.
Okay, yeah, check. Okay, roger that. And did you experience like any like parochialism?
It was known, one of the first events when you show up in kind of their screening process, because if you're in the Army, they would have you could just show up and you could try out. There's the physical screening that's I don't remember what all it consists of, but one of the events was 50 push-ups. And it was known that if you're a Marine, you need to be able to do 100 push-ups so that they count 50. And then pull-ups which is never, it wasn't an issue for us. I think we had to do 10 or something. And so the Marines were no issues there, but they would just, could not count reps. So you had to be, just slow and methodical and perfect push-ups every time.
Yep.
And able to continue. Eventually they realize that, hey, this, we'll be here all day if I don't count this guy's push-ups. So
yeah, they do that too in our academies too. I hated that. Like when I get over sergeant's course or one of the schools, I'd be on number 11.
Yeah. 11.
Like, oh, I just want to. I get why they do it now.
But they would learn. They would do that. They were much more strict on the Marines. Once we actually started the course, we had at least in 2 of the 4 phases there was a Marine instructor who had been Ranger qualified. And went back as. So they, in most cases, they were the toughest on the fellow Marines, right? But I don't know that we were really evaluated any tougher.
I guess
we got to patrols.
Okay, I guess more of what I wasn't even thinking about the instructor aspect of things, but the student aspect of things. When I talked to guys that went through Ranger School that were soldiers, they always just have this huge adoration towards the Marines that were in their Ranger School with them. Those guys were locked on, learned a lot. That's what I generally hear. And I know the Marine Corps is not sending their shitbags. I understand that, so they should have that esteem about them. But did you have that?
I
influence?
think so. I mean, I feel like those of us that went were kind of at the top of our game. We were all either grunts and snipers or recon guys. So we weren't learning a whole lot about the operations, right? So we had soldiers going through from all different MOSs and things like that. So I think we were as long as you were willing to be a mentor a little bit, and help guys out. Hey, man, here's why we do this, or here's how we do this, or here's how you set up a fire plan sketch, or whatever it was. They were really willing to listen and take it all in. And I didn't. One of the unique things about Ranger School is that at the end of each phase you do a peer evaluation, and you've got to rank everybody in your squad, and whoever gets ranked lowest, doesn't matter, you're gone.
Oh, right? Really?
No matter how well you're doing, you get recycled, and then you have to come back to the next course. The challenge with that is that when you get recycled, now you're Nick the new guy in a new team that's been together, so you're more likely to get recycled the next time because they just don't know you as well, right? So it was something you really did not want to have happen. You could get hurt and get recycled, or performance-wise, you could get recycled.
Yeah.
But being a peer recycle was one that you really, and it on the
Bad
other
tag.
It's also just it. When I asked about it after the course, they're like, it's kind of like the fog of war, right? This guy may be a great guy, but whatever. You pissed off this guy that everybody likes.
Now, does it work like that though at peer evaluations, or are you doing it personally for yourself, or do people game it and say we need to get this one out of here?
Some people, well, I think most of the time when I did it, when I was there, we used peer evaluations at where I work as well. But there, I was like, hey, I'm just gonna call it as I see it.
Yeah.
Put the weak link at the bottom. There, I think I've heard of teams that were like, hey, let's kind of rig the system so that nobody comes out at the bottom. Everybody gets like equal. And I don't know what they do in that situation, but it becomes pretty apparent that, hey, you're trying to game the game. I mean, maybe there's some good in that because, it means that it's a tight team.
Sure.
But there's also, as a leader, you've got to be willing to say that, hey, of the people that I have, you're the weakest link.
Yeah.
You're the guy who's going to benefit from remediation and retraining.
Yeah. And like, as the guy, as much as you like him, if he is the weak link, that's not the person you want in a gunfight with you right now. And you might not, like I probably wouldn't be thinking about that going through school. I don't want to hurt anybody's, chances or whatever. But, that's good. That's good that they do that. Now, was there ever a time where where people just weren't sure who the weak link was? Or was it pretty obvious who was putting out and who wasn't?
Normally there was, there's one guy who's, and he might have been a great guy on any other team on any other day, but, somebody usually it was some egregious error.
Yeah.
You fall asleep in the patrol base and, everybody gets waken up with flashbang or, RE simulators, and you've got to ruck up and run for a couple of clicks carrying each other because, this guy fell asleep. That's a pretty quick way to
find yourself at the bottom.
Yeah. And it's not, there's, you can only stay awake so much.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of it is kind of luck of the draw on who sees you, what measures you're willing to go to stay awake. And that was one of the things as Marines, we're like, I can't go back unsuccessful from this course, right? So I'll, if that means I've got to be on a knee, for my shift, or I got to stand up, a lot of it was, a little bit less tactical and a little bit more practical. Like I'd be like, fuck, I'll just stand up, man. I'll go, not lean on a tree. I'll not, lean on my rifle, but anything, because I will fall asleep if I don't.
Yeah. I've had that. I've had that in combat, and I talk about it in the book. And thank God I had a good team. My squad was gelled, but after 3, 4, 5 days of fighting under a kit with 2 hours of sleep a night, I was smoked. And I got up in this position, and me and my APL, we would take turns because everybody was smoked. And eventually he just stopped waking me up because it's like I'd go 10, 15 minutes and be like, hey, stand up, knee, whatever. And that night we had Loom coming over and snipers on a mission out near us, and it was not a time to, but my body just stopped. And he woke me up in the morning. Hey, I got everything taken care of, but you needed that, dog. You didn't move for like 6 hours or whatever it was. And that sucks. But if you have that team, the way you should have your team, you should be able to operate that, I think. So
yeah, and as a leader, we pretty much, if I've seen it across the Marine Corps, leader, we feel, of course, like, hey, I'm responsible. I've got to be everywhere doing everything. And, you're no good beyond a point when you can't make good decisions.
That's right.
I've, early in Afghanistan, I think close to 96 hours of just not sleeping, right? Constant going. And, falling asleep, like, on the way to, knowing that we're getting ready to get shot at. Just like, I cannot keep my eyes open.
Yeah.
It's your body will not, will only take you so far.
Yeah, the sleep thing's important. And then, like, the discipline as a leader to know, hey, I've got to shut this down right now, or I won't be worth a shit for them tomorrow. Or, you know, whatever that is, that line, once you reach it, just like what you're saying, leaders don't want to reach that line. They don't want to acknowledge that line. Sometimes you have to acknowledge the line and be like, okay, I need to shut down.
Yeah, and that's, you know, I mean, you can only learn that by experience, and you can only learn where the line is by getting close to it or going over it.
Yeah, getting to the line.
Right? And that's, you know, that's why hard training is, you know, so critical. You know,
100%.
Like I said, I say it all the time that, you know, there's I don't know who it's attributed to, different people, but the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. Or their drills were bloodless battles, so their battles could be bloody drills, right? Thucydides, I think.
Okay.
Right?
I like it.
You've got to, and that's what Ranger School does, you know, really, really well, is it pushes you. I remember in Afghanistan thinking, you know, I've been tireder than this before.
Yeah.
I've been hungrier than this before. I've been, you know, beat down much worse than this before. The only thing that's different is that it's real bullets coming back at me, right?
Yep.
So that's kind of always been, as a leader in recon and special operations, and sniper, right? My mantra is that, you know, we need really hard training. We've got to push people to their limits.
Give them something worse to compare their situation to when they're downrange. Yeah. Yeah, that 3-6 did that right before we left from Marja. Lieutenant Colonel Christmas and the Sergeant Major, we had a 22-mile hike, ruck, which was 22 miles long. I don't care if you're wearing nothing. 22 miles of forced march is rough. And we get back from the forced march, and we get down to the softball field there on River Road, and they have, like, you know, a 50-foot tug of war rope out there. Now, mind you, we just did 22 miles under the weapons packs and everything. Like, there's not skin on our feet anymore. Nobody's. You know, everybody's feet are jacked up. And we get there, and Colonel says, now we've gotten to the battle. Now it's time to play. Now you have to perform. And I hated him for it. Yeah. I cussed him. Said, these motherfuckers are trying to get people hurt. We're about to go to war. Then we get over there. Then things are saucy. Then we do a 17-click fighting clear through the, like, southern march out to, like, 5 points, right, on 608. And we finally get to where we're going. Everybody's smoked, kind of sitting around. And one of my lance corporals said, my feet don't hurt as bad as after that hike, though. And everybody just started smiling. And then I realized, I'm like, yep, that's why we do it. It's not to get people hurt, it's to make them tough. Yes. It's make them understand up here that we've done this before. Your feet have been like this before. Mm-hmm. And then we went and did other stuff. So right. Tough up, you know, think about that. At least it gives you somewhere to say that was worse, though, you know. And I think there's a lot in that. And I hated hiking for so many years. Thought it was not the way. Talked bad about it, and then after that, I never talked bad about hiking again. Like, yep, that's the way.
Yeah, I just had the fortune of, you know, unit leaders that can enforce that sort of mentality, and then courses that did it, and then the ability as a leader myself to do it. But I talk about it a lot, like digging a well, you know, of mental toughness, and you know, the deeper you dig it, the more reserve of mental toughness you gotta have, right? Doing things that suck make it easier to do things that suck. Mm-hmm. And
building resiliency, yeah.
You see it with, and it's not a critique or a knock on, I mean, things are different now than they were when I came in. And in a lot of ways, that's really, really good. Mm-hmm. But, you know, there's a huge focus on, you know, resiliency and you know, there's a quote by, you know, everybody knows Teddy Roosevelt, the man in the arena, right? The man whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood. You know, you know, as soon as the guy gets some blood on his face, you know, a corpsman runs out and it's like, hey, let's bring in and let's let you set out of this training evolution, and let's, you know, you're not going to have to fight through that. All right. Mm-hmm. So I think it's, you know, and I don't want to misconstrue that the ability of our people to be taken care of is huge. You know, our ability to get physical therapy and
sure.
Medical treatment and smart training, right? All of those things are great, but there's something to be said, like you were saying, for, you know, just getting your dick drug in the dirt and then having to fight after that, having a tug of war, having to grapple, whatever it is. So everything that pushes you to what you think your breaking point was, you know, and a little bit past it, and then you're like, oh shit, you know, I have a little bit more. I'm not dead yet.
Yeah. I think that's the appreciation I find for hard things, is that a lot of people just don't do hard things. Like the Marines, the Army, like you're going to be forced into stuff. You're going to do stuff. You're going to build good training, check. But the average citizen just does not push themselves to a level in which they can find out that there's so much more past that. Your body is capable of doing so much. It's kind of like what you said, that, you know, you want a title or do you want to be something? You know, do you want the title, or is it because that's what you are?
And I think that's, there's what I call manufactured difficulty, right? Things like, you know, my son loves doing Spartan races. You know, after I retired, I started running ultra marathons, and you see lots of people paying money, you know, good money to get their asses kicked, and because it's, I mean, once you do it, you see it, you're like, hey man, you know, I'm capable of so much more than I thought. But on a routine day, right, the average Joe or Josephine in society, you know, lives in a 72-degree house. They, you know, maybe go outside of the car. There's never a point where they're hungry, you know, like
real
really
hungry.
Not even close to being really hungry, right? You know, there's, you know, you can, I mean, we're cheering ourselves if they get 10,000 steps a day, right? So that, you know, so I mean, for a lot of people, and that's some of the, like the coaching I do is with, you know, people like that are like, hey man, there's got to be more to life. And when you start realizing that there is, when you start pushing yourself, then it kind of opens up a whole new landscape to you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're just like climbing to the top of a really fucking tough mountain. When you get there, you get to see shit that nobody else at the bottom gets to see.
That's right.
And that's, you know, I think there's more and more people are, you know, as fewer and fewer people are joining the military, right? Fewer and fewer people have to do like really hard labor, right? More and more people are saying, hey, I've got to find something to do that pushes me to, which I think is good. You know, on the one hand, I think it's, you know, a little silly that people pay money to get yelled at or to, you know, go do an obstacle course. But, you know, it's whatever it takes, right?
Yeah, but that's been career and life cycle. They've never done that. They've never even been around somebody that's probably gave them that inspiration before.
Yeah, so
that's why they're reaching out for it.
Right.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, so coming back to the track after I continue to rabbit hole and take those thoughts. I love it. That's what I love. But coming back to getting into recon, getting into special operations, that was after Ranger School?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Ranger School. We did a deployment to Oki, came back, and I took leave, went down to Camp Pendleton, tried out, took the NDOC down there, and I had, you know, improved my swimming considerably by that
Now,
point.
are you training that because you knew that's what you wanted to do? You're like, I need to get better at this?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah. So I had, fortunately, I had a buddy of mine who was in 3-7 with me. He was a squad leader in Kilo Company, so he wasn't a sniper, but he had taken the Recon NDOC, Force Recon NDOC before deployment.
Okay.
And he had passed it, but he had to finish the deployment before he could go. So, you know, he was like, hey man, you know, let's, you know, we PT together and work together. So it was, I had a pretty, let's say an easy time, but I mean, you know, the swimming was the big thing. And once I got that down, I got into First Force Recon and then into a platoon.
Now, can you explain, at least at that time, Force Recon's role? I know there's multiple. I don't know anything. That's why I'm asking you. What is the different roles and the different teams, if you will?
So at the time, there was Recon Battalion, and they essentially worked for the division, right? So they were the division commander's reconnaissance. So when a MU went out, the battalion would get a platoon of Recon Battalion Marines, and they were responsible for answering the RFIs of the battalion commander.
Okay.
But ultimately, their role was working for the division, the Marine division. Force Recon at the time was a standalone entity, a company. although it was an odd company, odd-sized company. We initially had a major as the company commander, and then it became a lieutenant colonel while I was there. But we were broken down into, it depended at times, up to 7. I think, early, like Somalia in the early 90s, there were 7 platoons, maybe 8.
Wow.
But most of the time I was there, I think there were 5. We had 5.
Are these full-size platoons?
About 30-man platoons, usually broken down into, it varied wildly, but 6-man recon teams, led by a sergeant, maybe a staff sergeant. It kind of depended. Generally speaking, the platoon sergeant was a gunny.
Okay.
And their role was to work for the MEF commander, right, or for the senior leader on the ground. So when we went into Afghanistan, I was the platoon sergeant by this point, 2001, and we worked like for Mattis. Like General Mattis was the task group commander, Task Force 58.
Okay, I didn't know that. I guess. Where were you at on 9/11?
So I was sitting in a pub in Darwin, Australia.
Oh, right on.
It was having a good time. I had the great fortune to be made a platoon sergeant of 2nd Platoon, 1st Force as a staff sergeant.
Okay.
That was kind of a unusual thing. I was actually promoted on September 1st of 2001 at sea, in the middle of the ocean somewhere.
That's awesome.
Got into Australia, and we did a couple days of training with the Australian Special Operations guys and snipers, and then our first real night of Libo was the night of September 11th, right? So we're sitting at an Irish pub in the port city of Darwin, pounding beers, and there's soccer or football right on TV, and then like suddenly the screen like switch, and it's the towers, and shortly after that the shore patrol comes running by like yelling get back to the boats, and one of the funniest thing, we're like, hey, we got to go, but we had like 3 or 4 pitchers of beer on the table, and I was there with my 3 team leaders, right, and they're all staff sergeants, and we're just kind of sitting there relaxing, talking about the mission, the training ops that we did. And that, in that day, pre 9/11, I mean, we were super focused on training because that's all there was, right?
Right.
So we're talking bullshit, and I'm like, hey, we got to get back to the boat. And one of the team leaders, a guy I think the world of, Willie he's like, this is probably the last beer we're gonna have in a long time. I'm like, yeah, let's have one more before we head back. There's no rush, right? So we actually finished our pitchers, go back to the boat, and they didn't leave without us.
Yeah. They're not gonna leave without you. Now, did you guys push straight into hostile water after that, or straight into close waters?
We went. We had already had laid on. We had to go to East Timor.
Oh my!
Right? It's a tiny little country that had been Timor, and they had a civil war, and they had split into 2 countries.
Okay.
All right, so the East Timor was ratifying their constitution, so it was kind of this big deal that they had invited U.S. presence, so the FIBRON commander for the Navy, the MU commander, everybody was going to attend this big ceremony. But now there was security concerns, so one of the roles that we would sometimes play in Force Recon was personal security details. So me and my lads got tasked with providing security along with some of the SEALs. So we had to check out all the routes that were being driven. We had to kind of make sure that our the guys that we were responsible for were safe during the event, and there were no issues. But we were there like the 13th, 14th of September, and then we headed to Pakistan and established the initial landing area and airfields and things in Pakistan that wound up being used for refueling throughout. And then by Thanksgiving, we were in Afghanistan.
Check. Now, what are you doing? What's the task? What's the mission when you get tasked with going into Afghanistan? Obviously, some stuff's coming if you're making refueling points and landing strips and things, establishing that in Pakistan. Did you already know that was to jump into Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. At this point, it was, and it was probably a little easier than it was. 2001. I know I didn't have a cell phone. I don't think people had, and if you did, it wouldn't work, right?
Yeah.
So there was a couple of phones on the boat, and there was a handful of computers that you could email from, but they quickly, those got shut off. So there wasn't a lot of concern of us, loose lips and ships and things.
OPSEC.
So we, we knew. I mean, the Force Recon is a unique organization, as the name implies, reconnaissance. Our primary role, is and had been, and through, Vietnam was deep reconnaissance, right? So answering the questions that the senior leader on the ground has, deep in enemy territory, and that's kind of what separates where battalion recon works and what Force Recon works. It's just the from the sphere of influence into the sphere of information or whatever, where they want to, things they want to know that they can't.
Force is going to penetrate deep.
Right.
Regular battalion's going to stay right there at that battalion level, or at that.
Relatively. I mean, generally speaking, they're kind of in the 3 to 5 mile range of the forward line of troops, whereas we could be, 50, 100 miles behind enemy lines, doing battle space shaping and things like that. The other role that we had was close quarter battle, doing hostage rescue and things of that nature.
Direct action kind of stuff.
Which was why, when there was a need for a security detail, we would get tagged with that because we could shoot really good and fast, right? So, which is always...
does that involve a lot of CQB training on the back end or on the front end too before you're going out? We didn't talk too much about the training at that level.
No, I think it's pretty well documented. But we would go through a close quarter battle package starting at about 6 months out, when you would kind of chop to the MU.
Working
right. You would do your workup, and it was a blast. I mean, that was among the most enjoyable training. I mean, really, really, really long days just standing on the line. But by the end of that, you get so accurate and fast with a pistol. When I started, we had MP5 ends, or the suppressed SDs. So much fun to shoot, right?
I bet.
So literally, you would 12 hours a day, you're just standing there in a pile of brass, shooting on the move, shooting moving targets, shooting various drills and things for speed and time and competition, and the transition drills from rifle to pistol. By the time we went to Afghanistan, we were largely transitioned into the M4.
Okay.
But yeah, and then the actual tactics of close quarter battles. So one of the missions that the Force Recon filled for the MU was an extremis hostage rescue. Okay. So if there were hostages, and someone else more qualified couldn't get there to take care of it, then we would do that. Seizures of gas oil platforms, or recovery of gas oil platforms, and visit board search and seizure of ships, shipboard takedowns, things like that. Those were a lot of the missions that we trained for.
Yeah. Dope. Now, as far as your CQB packages, where do you guys train those? At least the stateside ones.
So I was at First Force at Pendleton, and there's a range called Range 130. Okay. Where all of that took place. So it's grown immensely over the years, but when I first got out there, it was one Square Bay that we trained on for most of the pistol rifle work, and then a shoot house.
Live shoot?
Live shoot house. And the early days was, it was a little bit of kind of Wild West, right? With, it was common that we would have live hostages. Oh, wow. In the room. You might be the division commander or the MU commander or somebody's wife. It was just oh, wow. And it was
something that if you briefed it today would not happen.
Never in a million years, right? But it was, and there's probably places where it does, but there was a level, as soon as you took that role, there was a just massive level of intensity that, hey man, I got to, because you had already trained and worked up for a year with your team, right, in your platoon, and if you couldn't shoot well enough or whatever, you shot too many hostage paper targets, not, then you're just gone. You couldn't deploy. So you would get replaced, or you would get swapped out, and nobody, wanted that to happen. Nobody wanted to let down their team. So it was, some of the most intense training that I've been through, and the most fun. We had a blast doing it, but it was. There's nothing like it. It's hazardous training, right? You've got to be on your game all the time, and that's, I think, definitely the lesson that I took from that. Is in combat,
there's no minutes off.
There's no timeouts. There's no
resets. Index.
And if you're shooting live ammo, within 2-3 feet of your buddy who's moving. You've got to know each other, what each other's thinking, how each other. But if you do it enough, it becomes second nature. Right. There's one of the early in MARSOC, one of the commanding generals, had this saying that is, there are certain people that, because he was a basketball player, right, or a basketball lover. But when there's 2 seconds on the clock, there's some people, and you're down by 1, right? There's some people that really, really want the ball. Right, and that always kind of stuck with me as a good. There are people that we had to get us to the point where we were absolutely willing to take a shot when there was a live person. We wouldn't even think about it, right? It didn't even register. It's just there's, I know that my marksmanship skills are good enough that I can make this shot. That's
reinforces the confidence in the hard tasks that are ahead. And I see what you're saying. Almost makes you want to take that because you're there. Your confidence is at such a level. You got that. I'll go in there and smoke this.
I'm the best person to do this right now.
I went to Advanced Urban Combat School in Chesapeake, Virginia, over here on the East Coast. And by far was the most impactful school that I went to my entire time in the Marine Corps. And I was in fast company when I went. But we went there as a platoon, lived as a platoon, in a platoon squad bay style living. And like what you're saying, every single day, shooting paper, shooting steel. And then the culminating event was that live 2-story shoot house. And we did a dynamic entry. And I tell people about that now. And a lot of people don't want to hear it because they're like, oh, fast company's just this big, overrated. Which it is, but we did good training in that overrated unit. Like, maybe it's overrated unit, but we got just thousands of dollars more of ammunition than even a fleet unit gets for 35 guys. And then these schools, and that was a school where live shoot house at the end of the day. Now, what they would do, you didn't get kicked out if you couldn't shoot good. They'd give you a blue barrel, and you would go through the house with that semi-munition blue barrel because you sucked. Nobody still wanted to be that, like it wasn't good for your, like your cum inside the platoon, like, oh, you're a blue barrel, you get that blue falcon or whatever, whatever. But they didn't get, kicked off of a platoon or a team or anything like that. But the intensity of shooting in a house next to your friends is insane. And I never even did it in combat. Even in Marja, most of the stuff that people we took down was not clearing a building. It was fleeing a building maybe that we closed on or something like that. But to have that confidence inside a building is necessary. The confidence inside the training, whether you're in a building or not, to know your team, it was really reinforced in that school. So
I think
huge thing.
One of the things that I've come to realize, because then I later taught CQB and taught different things, is that, when you're taking a battlefield, right? Because it's close quarter battle, right? You're taking it and you're compressing it to 1,000 square feet, maybe. So everything that happens in a raid or an ambush or whatever still happens, right? You still have dead space. You still have avenues of approach. You still have bad guys and good guys. You still have all of the stuff that can happen. But now it's, every decision that you make has got to be made at such a, your OODA loop now has got to just be spinning, right? Like a freaking second hand. And then once, if you can deal with that, right, and you can get to where that becomes commonplace, then, when you step out in a street, right, time expands, right? And that's, the first I was a gunny by this point. The first time I got into a gunfight, the first gunfight I got into was like comical. I'm like, this is like everything's happening so, like I'm moving so fast compared to everybody else.
Ah, yes.
Right? And that was like this really, really, really weird.
You mean literally, not up here. You mean literally
No,
you're
well,
faster than people.
Up here. Well, both things were happening, but it just, when I was looking at them, it's like on the X-Men, the real fast guy,
Yeah.
that zips around. I mean, I felt like that. I felt like everybody was just moving so slow. Like the bad guys are trying to bring weapons up. They're trying to, and I'm like, thinking different things.
Can you walk me through that firefight and like kind of contextually?
Yeah, so that, again, 2001, I'd done several deployments before that as a element leader or assistant team leader, a team leader, and then a platoon sergeant by this time. So I've got 8-9 years at Force Recon, which was I was very fortunate to have the amount of time there. So we get tasked with so the MEU comes in and we establish a position in what came to be known as Camp Rhino. Right?
Yep.
It was kind of southern Afghanistan, about maybe 100 and some miles from Kandahar.
Okay.
And it was situated Kandahar, the Highway 1 that ran down to Lashkar,
Yep.
which a lot of people know. So we were tasked with interdicting traffic along Highway 1 coming out of Kandahar.
Okay.
So we went up, kind of looked at the situation, the best way to do that. We got the task to do it, but we were supported by elements from the 1-1, the BLT 1-1.
Sure.
So we stretched, the engineers came up, stretched concertina wire across the road. The road, because it's in the middle of the desert, was built on a pretty significant berm, right, to prevent it from getting destroyed or covered over right by sand. So we set back basically like a speed trap, right? I had one vehicle with half my guys in it, and then my other vehicle is a base of fire set up in case they needed to engage. And we basically, I just sat back talking to air, right, and they let us know eventually that, hey, there's some vehicles leaving Kandahar. They'll be your way in a while. No idea if they were good or bad at the time. Technically, everybody was considered hostile, so we were within our rights to just kind of shoot.
And where are we at year-wise again?
2001.
You're right in the beginning.
Yeah,
Okay.
so this is December 7th of 2001.
Okay.
There had been the Green Berets, the horse soldiers. They were operating up in the mountains. So they were working, and there had been a lot of bombing, but this would be the first Marine Corps engagement of the war.
Huh. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care who you are. If
It's
you're a
pretty
Marine, that's
cool.
pretty dope.
So we, but of course we don't know any of this yet, right?
Yeah.
So I'm talking to my guys, and I'm like, hey, coming from a guy who's a gunny now, but has never fired a shot in anger, right? And none of my guys had. So I'm like, hey, let's kind of play this as we see it. It's chances are, there's the chance that the vehicle coming up, it might be orphans trying to flee.
Oh, so you didn't know like the disposition,
No.
the people inside.
No,
You
so-
just knew that there were
so-
some people coming.
Right. So
Okay.
we really needed to, I was adamant. I mean, the worst thing I could imagine was having, us, lay into a vehicle and then, find a
Yep.
family or whatever,
Yep.
right? So I didn't want to put that on me, certainly, but certainly none of my guys. I
Sure.
didn't want to be responsible for that. So that's why I was like, hey, we've got to stop these vehicles. We have to identify them before we can do anything. So we stretched concertina wire out, which if you've never seen a vehicle hit concertina wire, it's a pretty amazing sight.
Is it? I never have.
Oh, it's crazy. But so there were 3 vehicles headed our way. 2 very large vehicles that just from what the air could see, like a bus and like a 5-ton or whatever. And then the one in front was a smaller truck.
Okay.
But what we were gathering as they were getting closer is that every 10 or 12 miles, the lead vehicle, the truck, would go out in advance, kind of scout the route. The other 2 vehicles would pull off into the desert. So that seems pretty suspicious.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But, I don't know.
Well, you had ISR following them, or birds, or something.
Yeah, I mean, this was fighters were up, just keeping an eye on them. This was not a whole lot of unmanned ISR or anything.
Right at the time.
At this point. So eventually they pass us, and as they pass us, we run the Humvee up the berm behind them. Like we're a cop, basically, is the way I kind of looked at it.
In between, okay, so before the concertina?
Before the concertina.
Okay.
So we marked the concertina with glow, chem lights, so they had the opportunity to stop or not to stop. I don't know that they knew what was going on, but they recognized, that, hey, we got a vehicle behind us. They punched it into the concertina wire, which just totally wrapped the axles and stopped it really, really quickly. I mean, it was staked, pretty well staked down, but I was surprised by that. So I'm in
how fast? How fast did it stop it? Like immediately? Boom, 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 boom.
They didn't. Yeah, it didn't make it more than like 3 car lengths. Before it stopped.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that was really neat to see. So I'm in the vehicle commander seat of the Humvee. My rigger is one of the parachute riggers is driving. Right, he stops, and I can see that it's a cool dual cab pickup. Right, but because they've run into the concertina wire has largely like stretched itself like a slinky down the sides. So the doors are banging, but they can't immediately get out of the doors, and it's cold. I mean, this is December 7th. It's it's below freezing.
The nighttime.
Yeah.
So it's like cold in the desert, baby.
Yeah, it's really, really cold. In the back, there are 3 dudes sitting on boxes or whatever, and I remember this taking all of this information in like really, really rapidly at this, and that's really and it was almost it was like a shift, like a total shift. Like I just switched into either me moving fast or them moving slow. Right? It was like a clock just time for me was at normal speed. It's just the way it felt. I didn't feel like I was moving super rapidly, but I felt that everything else was super slow. And we had been, had during our CQB training, FBI agents that had come in and talked about this, right? And there was not a whole lot of study at the time, but the idea of combat mindset and the things that happened, spatial disorientation and all this stuff. So I knew a little bit about it, enough to, the wheels started spinning in my head. But there are 2 dudes that are completely wrapped up because it's, like I said, it's really, really freezing. The guy in the middle was older. He had on one of the little, Afghani hats, but he had his AK was outside of the blankets, all right, and his hands were, I could see, no gloves or whatever. His hands were like beet red. His face is all red, big beard, a gray bearded guy, right? So he'd obviously been around for a while. I jump out the side door. My guys kind of pile out of the back of the Humvee and come around. And we had trained to do a mission, a vehicle takedown mission, where we forcibly stop a vehicle, go up to the, approach the sides of it, and then shoot any people with weapons.
Sure.
Right. We couldn't do that quite because of the way the concertina wire was, but it became pretty obvious pretty quickly that these weren't good guys in the vehicle. So the old guy was the first one to start. He's kind of fumbling, trying to get up, and so I shot him, and then the other dudes are scrambling. So kind of.
What's the range right now? Point blank? Or?
It's not. It's probably me to the garage door.
10 feet.
Like 10, 15 feet. Yeah. So and we had. There's the thing in combat called perseverance shooting. We were trained. I mean, like I said, I've probably not to brag, but I had as much close quarter battle training as most people, or maybe a lot more than most. But and you're trained to fire a pairs, right, to the body, and then favor your drill if necessary.
Sure.
But there's a thing that happens called perseverance shooting, where if the 2 to the body doesn't work, then chances are good you're going to keep shooting to the body.
Like a Mozambique.
you just keep like
till he's down.
Just yeah. Because what you expect to happen doesn't happen, right? We expect that 2 to the body, 1 to the head, the guy's gonna go down, but these guys are propped up, in the back of this vehicle with stuff around them, so they can't really, show the effects. I mean, they're dead many times over now because they. But then finally, I shoot a multiple target failure drill engagement, boom, 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 across the heads. And at this point now, dudes are breaking the windows and trying to climb out of, and it's like a clown car, right? They're just piling out. So we're shooting them, but out of nowhere, a big flame like erupts from the back of the truck.
Okay.
So our gunfire had ignited, a fire.
Okay.
Right. So now the vehicle is burning and very quickly is just fully engulfed. Right. So at this point, I'm like, I think everybody inside is either dead or will be very soon. So I'm like, hey, let's back the hell up because I don't want this thing blowing up. So we pull back and are just starting to, the team leaders are kind of starting to go around and get, their ACE report, ammo casualties, equipment, and suddenly an RPG launches at us. And like, what the hell, man? How did anybody survive this?
Out of the vehicle?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
So we're like, fuck. And then, we're trying to, we all drop back down and start returning fire. And then RPGs start like launching into the air. So this truck was full of demo and ammo. And, rounds are start cooking off. But the first RPG was in a tube. So when it cooked off, it looked like it shot. The other ones were just like pinwheeling into the night. So it was a pretty awesome show. So we pull back at this point. We realize, we're not going to be able to go in and do an assessment because this thing is fully engulfed. That was enough validation of the fact that the other 2 vehicles that had pulled off into the desert were bad guys. So we brought in air on those and just obliterated. Though what they estimate was like 75 or more dudes in those.
It was just a caravan of weapons, ammo, and dudes coming down? Right on.
So we just trying to get stuff out of Kandahar before Kandahar was taken and hide it or whatever the case was. So that was it, right? That was the first gun battle.
What when obviously you guys had some sort of camp or BP or something you're going back to, right? Rhino?
We weren't. We were at just a patrol base.
Patrol base. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when you walk back to the patrol base, I always ask people this: after your first gunfight and you've won the day, what is that like?
It was, at this point, we had been awake that was like 96 hours, right? We had been awake for a long time. So we were so tired. But you're also just
jacked
on this massive adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
So we got back, and I couldn't get rid of this thought that I was like, there was just all of these things I had read about, and there's a guy, Colonel Jeff Cooper, who was the guy who established Gunsight. If you're at a training facility, like it was out on the West Coast, it was like, he's relatively long been dead. Okay. But he was like the first guy that really spent a lot of time thinking about combat mindset and writing about it.
Oh, you're talking about like Cooper's color code?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he invented that. So that, that was really rolling around in my head. Everything I'd read, and I was like, I experienced a lot of it like verbatim, right? And I'm like, man, I've really got to know more about this.
Yeah. So
we get back, and we that rush kind of wears off. We can't keep our eyes open. And I'm like, hey, man, the battalion commander is there. He's like, hey, we got to debrief. We got to do this. I'm like, hey, bro, we're going to take a nap. All right, we're going to go to bed. When the sun comes up in the morning, wake us up. We're all yours. But we're no good to you until we get some sleep.
That's a fact, yeah.
So I got, gathered everybody around, and I've always, maybe a little bit too much, but, just concerned that, guys, I get probably can't do it too much, but guys react differently to different situations, right? So I wanted to get the time to let anybody get anything off their chests that they needed to, and that was it was totally righteous, right? I mean, we're 2 months after, less than 3 months after 9/11, right? So there's not a whole lot of love being lost.
Yeah.
Right. But and there weren't any. They were all bad guy, all Taliban. So there was, but still, I'm like, hey, does anybody got anything they need to talk about? I had one of the lessons I learned early in my life is that if you have the opportunity to carry around a flask of whiskey, right, as a leader, and it. I had one that had bottom of my ruck, and I don't even know, rum probably or something in it, and it was the guys who were 13 or 14 guys with me. It was, they didn't get a mouthful, right, but it was just just like, hey, just pass this around. You great work. Everybody did a really good job. Tomorrow we're gonna tear this apart, right? What did we do well? What can we do better? One, we owe it to everybody, right? This was the first gunfight that had happened. Certainly Force Recon, but
Marine
Corps fight of the. So we've got to make sure we capture everything, all lessons learned, all of this, and so the next day, we went to sleep. Next day we did the debrief with them and with the battalion. But then we sat around for the bulk of the day, and then I sat down with each guy individually and was like, hey man, did you how did time proceed for you? How did one of the weird things that I had read about was called intrusive distracting thoughts, right? Where you're in the middle of a gunfight and you're thinking about lasagna or whatever it is, right? You're just and it's because you're if you train properly, everything is being taken care of by your subconscious. So your conscious mind has nothing to do. Right?
Yeah, it's on autopilot, kind of doing its own thing.
Yeah, so I had this. I remember it like it was yesterday. Like when I first saw that old guy's AK, he had. And I was more crystal clear than if it had been daylight. Right, he had there was wire wrapped around the handguards, and it was. The stock was all
bedazzled,
scarred and
scarred.
And,
Okay.
It was just an old ass. The mag in it was like no bluing whatsoever on it, And I was like, what was going through my head was like, after we kill all these fuckers, I'm going to take that AK, I'm going to hide it in the caminet bag. Right?
Take it with you.
And we're going to take it home. We're going to mount it, and we're going to put it up in the headquarters at First Force.
And you were
that was I'm thinking like how we'll mount it, what the plaque will say, all this, right? While I'm shooting these guys, and then I'm like, why am I thinking about this? I should get my head in the game. But it's it's something that's played out over and over and over in my time. Is that if you train hard enough, like we talked about, you train repeatedly enough, you're able to take the things that you need to do that you have to consciously do and hand them over to the subconscious. Yeah. And once you do that, your forebrain has nothing to do but think of random stupid shit.
Yeah, I talk about in my book a little bit about tachypsyche, or the perceived speed in the mind when under duress. And because I ended up teaching at SOI afterwards, and I developed a class to talk about that because it's something that boggled my mind when I was in combat. And the reason it boggled my mind was because like 8 out of 10 guys, everything sped by like a blur for them. It was hard for them to recall certain things. For me, everything slowed down. I absolutely had auditory exclusion, which isn't always good when you're in a leadership position, but I did. It seemed like I heard the things I needed to hear, and I seen the things I needed to hear, but much like you were saying, it seemed like the whole battlefield was in slow motion to me most of the time when things were super intense. Now, when things weren't intense, that wasn't the case, but when we were actually getting after it in a gunfight, which was a lot in the MARSOC deployment, things slowed down. And kind of like what you said, when you said everybody seemed to be in slow motion, the reason I wondered, I wanted to talk about that was because I still want to know why that is. Yeah. I don't know why 8 people feel this way and 2 people feel that way.
Yeah, I don't
think it's a matter of training.
I do. I definitely do. Out of the guys that I had with me, everybody experienced the same thing I did, except for one.
Okay.
And that guy was, a little bit lost in the sauce.
Color code black?
A little bit, yeah. And that's a great example of, and a lot of it, I think Jeff Cooper was far ahead of his time, right? And, when we take like Cooper's color code and then kind of combine that with Boyd's OODA loop, right? And that was one of the benefits of being in reconnaissance marine is that we harp so much on you're always under observation and you always have to be observing. So you hopefully you never get caught, all right, in the not being in the at least in the O of OODA loop. So very quickly you orient and in the more of that training that compresses time and compresses the requirement for action, like close quarter battle training, you do, I think, helps with that. So from everything I read and understand, everybody doesn't react, certainly everybody doesn't react the same way, but
sure,
everybody doesn't react the same way every time. Right? There's whatever number, probably 1 million factors that play into it, where I might react really, really well, a lot of times, and then the next time. But I would say it's almost a guarantee that the more times you experience that, the more likely it is that you'll react well.
Yeah, I would echo that.
But the auditory exclusion, that absolutely is what initially shocked me. It's like they were shooting and the rounds aren't loud, right? I'm like, what normally it really, really hurts if you're not wearing your 3M earplugs, right?
I think your brain just realizes that it's not time to worry about the loudness maybe or something.
What I've read probably as much as anybody on this subject, anything I can find, and it seems to be that the initial sense that kind of triggers the stress reaction is the one that heightens. So your vision, in most cases, right, as you see something, you see the threat, your vision gets really, really good.
Yep.
It might there's perceptual narrowing as
sure.
well,
yep.
where you get you become hyper focused on the threat. But from when we were cave people, right, when as soon as the fight or flight response kicked in, we needed to either be able to identify the target and identify what's going on with it, because what happens, and it's a legacy thing. I mean, in the past, a threat really wasn't a threat unless it was within 5-10 meters, right? So your eyes you lose long range focus. Your eyes kind of set themselves to close in, right? But that becomes crystal clear, right? Like I said, I was seeing the identifying scars and the stock of this guy's weapon and the baling twine or whatever that was wrapped around the handguard, and that was like seared in my mind, right? But so perceptual narrowing, the auditory exclusion, like you talked about, there's a thing called shunting, where your blood flow restricts itself to the major organs, right? To which you're gonna have to run with or fight with, and so your
dexterity and
motor
such
skills and things go away.
Yep.
So a lot of that we're able to come back from that and say, hey, if we know that these things are going to happen, how do we design training to account for that? So instead of trying to jam your slide release, with a finger, smash it with your palm. Right. There's a lot of things kind of came out of that.
My generation was raised on that, which is awesome. Yeah, totally agree. I heard a psychologist, and I don't want to attribute it to the wrong one. I don't know that it was Jordan Peterson. But that's one of the psychologists that I follow, but it was one of them, and it was talking about auditory exclusion and why human beings would have developed that. And I don't know that this is true, but it makes good sense to me. Like you were talking about with vision and hearing a second ago, when we were cave people or when we were Neanderthals or, in the beginning, threats were like going to eat us, and threats were like, whatever, woolly mammoths, and threats might have been saber-toothed tigers or lions or whatever the case. And what they said was the reason that we would have to evolve to have auditory exclusion, at least, was because what that lion is going to do when he comes up is he's going to roar at you and it's going to paralyze you. And knowing that threat is going to be loud, aggressive, whatever the case, the auditory exclusion is what allows man to stand his ground when that kind of thing is coming at him early. And that was his explanation. And I started thinking about that, and I'm like, don't know that that's the no end all be all, but that makes good sense of why we would evolve to have our sight, our hearing, the exclusion and such when we're in a desperate or dire moment. Like when that your life's on the line, maybe that's innate born into human beings to have a little bit of that. I don't know.
I hadn't heard that. I don't know if there's any way that anybody could prove it.
No, I don't either.
It does. It's a good theory, as any.
It makes sense to me, at least in the early, human lineage. But whatever it comes from, I think it's absolutely a good thing in combat to maybe not hear everything on the battlefield, maybe not smell everything that you're going to smell on a battlefield at certain times, or see
and
them.
I do think, like you said, you seem to hear the things that are important, right? So, communication, we got yelling or whatever, I would hear that would kind of like cut through everything else. So I think there's, and again, I think the more that you train to that, so the more you can train in low light conditions where people can't see, the more you can make things challenging, then the closer you're going to replicate those, because it's nearly impossible to create that sort of environment outside of, somewhat in close quarter battle. You can kind of do that, right? Because there's just so much happening so fast. I tried at one point, which was not even considered. It was shot down to inject people with adrenaline and try to. Yeah, that was not something that was HIPAA, I guess.
I don't think that. although I see what you're saying. Yeah, get them to that.
That's what happens is you. So what you can do, like, there's a guy, Bruce Siddell, who wrote this book, Sharpening the Sword, something along those lines. It's a kind of esoteric book, but he really talks about heart rate and in combat, right, and stress level. And so when your life is in danger, your heart rate can jump up to in the 200s, right? That's not sustainable, right? You can't, and it would be tough to get it up there, by PTN. Right? Yeah. So, but the better shape you're in, we do well when our heart rate hits like 115 to 145. That's kind of like the sweet spot of being energized enough to do what we need to do and do it rapidly, and not too energized to where dexterity and things start being hampered. So that's something I've been fascinated with, like heart rate training and trying to figure those things out when I was a CQB instructor. Sure.
Yeah, I do a little bit with that in the contracting world. Now I work for Conflict Kinetics. Not full time, but I go in when I can, and it's a simulator. It shoots lasers, but we're able to put these guys at a VO2 max. We'll have them in a kit and just wear that ass out. But while they're getting worn out, they're shooting cognitive processing drills, and it's reducing their decision latency. So we're getting them to nearly to a VO2 max, and then making them shoot drills where they have to identify colors, letters, symbols amongst a group of targets. So they have to use their logical thinking brain at a VO2 max. And you see these guys at a starting assessment, and they'll shoot X, and then you'll see them at the like the concluding assessment, and they'll shoot 100 times better than that with faster scores, more accurately, which shows that decision latency and that calmness is coming about them through the program. And so it's interesting to track that kind of stuff with shooters today, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm a big. I mean, I've known about. I didn't know you work with those guys.
Oh yeah, okay.
I've gone up to like demos at different places and been a big advocate of us getting some of that. But I've been out to Buds. They have in their gym. They have a CK setup.
Oh, okay.
Where they you fight and then you got to jump up and
get
after it. So
we did that. Well, we had one on Lejeune 2 years ago. It kind of went down, but we're about to do some stuff with the Marine Corps that just came through. And I think the first system may be going out to 29 Palms. I don't want to state that before it comes out. But I know I think that's going to be the first place, and there's a bunch of different Marine Corps stations that are going to pick those up as the contract proceeds, be it that it proceeds the way that it's expected to, and it delivers, and I think it will. But I got involved with them because it was something I believed in. I went over to Lejeune. I seen it on Lejeune. I shot it a couple times, and I've been blown up as well, and I have some memory issues, and I have some things, and I'm watching those things improve as well. And I don't know what to tie that to. Necessarily, but it's absolutely helping do something for me, and that might not be a tribute to shooters coming up, but maybe it does. Maybe if, you know, you got some TBI issues as a fighter, you can come through and you know, maybe improve some of that stuff. So when we did a best ranger course, CK, we had a system out, or a best squad course out in Campbell months ago. And some of the older guys that came in that were SF guys in the 90s and such, maybe even before that a little bit, they were talking about how they were trying to implement this kind of stuff via live fire back in the day, where it'd be like red balloon, blue balloon, yellow balloon, or ABC, you know, placards or something, and then getting them up to a VO2 max and making, you know, them shoot the called out, not shooting everything, but shooting one of something, but identifying it. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense. That's the right way to, you know, to kind of train that, I think. But
when we would go through the CQB package at the Special Operations Training Group, now they're called the EOTG, the Expeditionary Operations Training Group. The final night of that, this culminating event, it's called the Hell House.
Okay.
And you had to go through with a buddy, and at least out at first, you know, you come into, you know, there's, you know, heavy, you know, metal, like death metal blaring. There's TVs with like movies going on. There's stuff on fire. There's like cans with, you know, stuff burning in there.
Sure.
You'd walk through and there's just stuff hanging in your face, and you come into one of the rooms and it was just like this, you know, haunted house of terror, right? One room you'd come into and there would be, all of the walls were just plastered with the exact same target, but they would, you know, tape on different, so you could tape on a pistol or a stapler or shoot or no shoot things, right? And they would, you know, you would yell at you like as you were going in, like you could only shoot, you know, knives or whatever. And so there's maybe 4 or 5 knives within this room of 150 targets, and you've got to, you know, that level was, I mean, that's the way we tried to get after it in the early days. You know, and now, you know, there's so much technology that's really awesome.
I think that for me, and I don't want to get too much on a CK bender here, but I believe in it because of that. They're able to take that. You don't need ammo allocation. You don't need a range allocation. If you want to do simple, you know, like E-quals for the Navy or quals for the Marine Corps, you can build that. Or if you want to bring guys in that know what they're doing and you want to hit them with multiple different things. Like one of my favorite drills is an A1 plus drill, where you have 180 degrees where the screen's around you and you have to move around, but there's going to be 15 different targets that come up on each one of these screens. Only one of them is a shooter on each screen, right? So 15 targets on this screen come up. There's one A, one plus, or one A's, ones and pluses. One, you know, now one might be the letter one or the number one, or it might be one spelled out. The plus might be spelled out, or an addition symbol, you know, like that. So you have to go through it, and it teaches, doing it enough teaches you to look between the lines for the anomaly. Instead of reading every target, finding that target, letting your mind find that target for you. And it's hard to tell people, but once they get it, you'll watch them going from, you know, 50, 60 seconds to 20 seconds that they can negotiate all of those decisions. And I see it helping people. So I love the technology coming out. I think it's great. I think whatever we can do to make a more sound warfighter, both in the rear and down ranges, I'm all about it. So anyway, get off that track. We'll get back. I do that a lot. Where are we at?
Afghanistan.
Yeah. Rhino, first gunfight. Right. Now, you guys debrief it. You talk about it. How does that debrief go with you guys? Is it pretty open, pretty jovial, or no?
Yeah, it was. I mean, everybody was. I mean, you know, you wake up the next morning after a rest, and you're like, man, that really happened, right? You know, the thing that at that point I'd been in the Marine Corps 12, 13 years, maybe 14. And you know, I was told at boot camp, drill instructors told us that, hey, during a 4-year enlistment, you're going to get into a gunfight. That was bullshit, right? But that's what he told me. That's what I kind of believed. And I'm like, you know, I've been through 4 years, and I've been another four, and you know, I've been like on my 4th enlistment, probably, whatever, and nothing, right? I've come, you know, a couple of like close calls, you know, I missed, like I said, Desert Storm. I did. You know, while I was in Buenos Aires, we had this coup attempt. So, I mean, there were some shots being fired around. You know, I was up on the roof with an M14 and just kind of checking things out. So, I had seen, shots fired. I'd seen people getting, but I had never personally been involved in a gunfight. So I mean, the dudes are really happy. One, I mean, and that's one thing that's, I mean, and anybody that's been there, it's counterintuitive, but I mean, that's the reason that we joined.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we probably shouldn't like it too much, but I mean, it's a seminal experience in your life. All right.
Fact.
And you would be, I'd be lying to say that there's not a level of enjoyment that comes from, eliminating bad dudes,
yeah,
or at least people that we think are bad dudes.
Perceived,
there's a huge level of enjoyment that comes from being alive, at the end of that, and there's for me, like, an immense amount of, like, satisfaction that, like, my guys had performed really, really well.
100%.
Right? So all of the stuff that we had, I was, perceived the asshole lots of time because I'm like, we're not going home, man. We're going to stay. We're going to work late. We're going to
figure this
patrol,
out.
that patrol. We're going to get you to the point where, combat's going to be easier than training was.
Mm-hmm.
And so to see them, kick ass, there was, really validating as a leader that, hey, my guys for almost across the board, like I said, and one guy who was a little bit sketchy, but we kind of knew that going into it.
Yeah.
So that was, that was really phenomenal.
Gives me cold chills to hear that because I feel the same way. Like, I said this in a couple of my speeches, and I catch some flack from my wife about it. But in my speech, I said that leading Marines in battle was the joy of my life. And I've had 3 kids. I've married 2 women. I fought in 2 wars. I've done some things, but watching those Marines that I trained, that I, was responsible for, go into battle, go into the ultimate arena, and then not just, because a lot of people say, I survived combat. That's not what my men did. My men went and thrived in combat. They went and did exactly what they were supposed to do, with honor. And to see that is just, and to say it and to know it's true just tingles me because, like, as a Marine leader, that is the ultimate prize, is to get there and know that your efforts and your tilling of that soil came to fruit and bear fruit that was right.
Yeah, that's why we exist, right? As leaders. And so that's, it's a, like, almost indescribable.
Yeah,
like,
it's hard to put into words.
Level of pride. And it's, it happens within such a short time that it's kind of exacerbated.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, I have 2 kids. I love them to death, and I've, been able to watch them grow up and do great things. And my son's 29, right? So, it's huge, but that pride is, like, spread over 29 years of his life. Mm-hmm. When you train up for 6 months, deploy and are in intense situations, everything gets compressed. The feelings get compressed, all the emotions, and so it's. I don't know that it's. I don't know. It would be hard to like pick. Like, you can't pick your favorite kid.
Well, and I've went back on that statement. I said that statement in a speech to 1-2 before they were pushing out, and I just said it. It wasn't part of my speech. It was as I was talking to them after I had gotten finished giving my my written speech. And I would have to go back. I would have to say my children, by far, now in my life, are the joy of my life. Watching them grow, teaching them, helping them, being friends with them. I work a lot, but I try to spend as much time as I can, with my children, and that's the joy. But the very close second, and my wife, but the very close second would be my dudes for sure, and what they did. So. Yeah, it's an amazing experience, and not all Marines get to experience that. Like, I think a lot of people are under this, impression, like I was coming up when I enlisted. I thought the Marine Corps was infantry. I didn't know there was other things. I knew there was recon, I knew there was infantry, and I thought that's what people did. A lot of Marines don't ever get to do that. In combat anyway. So
even at the height, of the war, I mean, they were just. Even if you deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan, not everybody, was shot at, right?
I'd say more were not than were, by far.
Yeah, by a pretty significant margin, I suspect. So yeah, it's a unique thing. It's what we signed up to do. It's it's a defining time in your life.
100%. I think it changes people too. Not necessarily bad, but it gives a reassured confidence about their individual character that says, I went to the ultimate arena and then I came back from that.
Yeah, and it's in one way it's the same thing as that 20-mile ruck, right? You're like, I've been shot at, right? I've shot people. I've experienced the best and worst of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So everything after this is kind of a cakewalk. Right, yeah. And I think you can look at it two ways. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that like everything after this is a letdown.
Yeah,
right?
Unfortunately.
And I've got to, drink a lot, or I've got to do life-threatening things, or stupid shit, or whatever it is to try to recapture that.
Chasing the dragon.
And I think more of us, hopefully, are made better by it.
Yeah.
Right, I definitely think I'm a better person.
No doubt that I am. It's changed my entire life, my view on everything. Yeah, man. I think that's great. Obviously, the deployment and career doesn't stop there. Was there obvious differences in your men after that?
I think so. I think they're like you
as far as confidence and such. Yeah,
definitely. Because for our MU, that was really, and I don't think I'm shortchanging anybody. That was pretty much the only combat action that was seen.
Okay.
While we were there, the East Coast MU came in and we ripped out with them, and so when they're like, hey. Combat action ribbons, like there's only 12 of them being awarded, right? There was only 2 like awards with V's given out, right? And that was my guys.
Yeah.
So getting back on the boat and heading back home, there was definitely recon guys are cocky anyway, a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So we when you're on a ship as a Force Recon platoon, people look up to you.
Yeah, you're the big dick walking down the.
You are. And,
walking down
one of
the
the
deck.
things I always try to instill in them was that comes with responsibility. Right?
Yep.
That comes with there's benefits to it. Obviously, you've got the guy on mess duty that would make sure you get first dibs on steaks. If you bring him down and let him like play with the MP5 or whatever.
Yeah.
But it comes with a lot of responsibility too. So you can do a lot of good by sitting down with the platoon of infantrymen and just talking to them. So we did like a lot of that on the way back. A lot of like, hey, let's talk about the lessons that we learned, and
absolutely.
And so it comes over well. I think it was appreciated. But then when we got back to the States, we were kind of the heroes for a little bit, moment in time. Going through the ARs and talking with everybody about what it was like and everything.
Now, one thing I meant to ask before. So you pieced these dudes up. You hit them with a failure in the back. Bop, 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 bop. Was there a passenger in the truck too?
Yeah,
multiple.
Yeah, there were multiple. There were
like up front.
Yeah, so
okay.
It was a dual cab truck. So there was somewhere between. There were at least 6 guys in the front, and I think more because it was so freaking cold. I think they were packing in, and they were relatively small guys. So some of them were coming out of either pushing the door open and getting out trying to get around the concertina wire. Some were trying to come out windows. Some of them were just killed from rounds that went through the back of the vehicle.
Okay.
And then some of them likely were burned alive.
Yeah. Well, I guess my question was so if boom, they run into the gate here, and you guys pull up behind them. Now they're kind of trapped. Were all your guys from this angle firing that way, or did you have guys down the road here too? Or
no, so all my guys were behind, and then I had a support by fire vehicle that was on a little rise, maybe 100 meters away.
What'd they have?
They had a
gun-wise,
a 50 cal.
Okay.
So they had, I think think they had a 50 cal or a I think so. Yeah,
Maybe like a 240 or some kind of machine gun?
They probably had a 240 as well, but I'm pretty sure they had a mounted. It was an IFAV.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure they had mounted 50 cal, but you need to be really careful with that because we're in very close proximity. So they didn't engage because it didn't make sense to.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that's wild. Cool. You make it back. You're heroes for a while, but then it's back to training. You're not heroes forever. It's back to working up, and tell me about that. What's the next one that you're moving on?
So at this point, I had been at First Force for, like I said, over approaching 9 years, and they were like, "Hey, man, you've got to do something else." So I went. I had actually wanted to go back before that deployment on MSG duty, and take my kids. Like I said, my wife had experience with it.
Yep.
I thought it would be really cool to raise your kids overseas. But of course, when I get back, talking to the wife about it, she's like, "Hey, and I'm not as comfortable taking the kids overseas right now, with everything going on." And I was also like, I really don't want to do that anymore. I want to, I want to get back in the fight. Mm-hmm. So I had to go somewhere. So I went to SOTG, the Special Operations Training Group, and ran the Urban Sniper course and the Urban Reconnaissance and Surveillance course for a while. Not for very long, because what happened was, it wasn't news, but at the time the Secretary of Defense was Donald Rumsfeld. Yep. And as soon as the attacks happened, he was like, "Hey, we need more special operations guys." Mm. So the SEALs were told to make some more teams. The SF was told to make more Green Berets, and the Marine Corps was told, "Hey, man, you chose not to participate in Special Operations Command in 1987 when it was started. Now you need to provide. All right, got to play." And the Marine Corps, true to Marine Corps form, was like, "Nah, we really don't want to do that. We're not keen on giving up our forces." Mm-hmm. And Special Operations Command, kind of true to their form, was like, "Hey, no, we're good. We don't." There's a joke that U.S. Special Operations Command is spelled ARMY, right? It's and rightfully so. I mean, most of the preponderance of Special Operations forces are Green Berets and Rangers and PSYOPs and all of that. I mean, they dwarf. I forget the percentage, but it's I think 50%. And today MARSOC is like 5% of the total pie. Mm-hmm. So the Marine Corps didn't want to do it. SOCOM didn't want to do it, but Rumsfeld said, "Well, I don't care. You're going to do it." So what they ultimately decided on was that they would make a small unit that would serve as a test bed to see if Marines could serve in special operations. So I got a call from the guy who had been my boss at First Force, the company commander there. He had been my boss at Special Operations Training Group. This Robert Coates, who's a colonel, and he's like, "Hey, I'm putting together this unit. It's going to work for SOCOM. You want in?" And what answer do you give other than "fuck yeah"?
Fuck yeah.
So it was. I mean, that I talk about this in my book. Like, that's like being a pitcher, and somebody being like, a college pitcher, and somebody like, "Hey, you want to come throw the World Series," right?
Yeah,
being like a drummer, and somebody, you want to play for the Rolling Stones, just like the ultimate. Yeah. So we formed this unit. It's called, the long name was United States Marine Corps Special Operations Command Detachment 1. That usually got like truncated into just Det One. Det One. Or the Det. So initially there were 86 of us, about a Force Recon platoon of around 30, about a 30-man intel platoon, and then we had like communicators and logistics guys and headquarters, everything else that you need. By the time we deployed, we'd like taken on some reservists and some other people. We were about 100. Okay. So we trained up, not knowing where we were going to go, assuming that we were going to go to Afghanistan initially. But while we were training, the push into Baghdad had happened, and so Iraq was now kind of fully engaged as well. Mm-hmm. So we were most of the way through our training when they told us we're going to go to Iraq, and we would deploy under the cognizance or the command of a Naval Special Warfare Task Group. So we went under Task Group 1, so SEAL Team 1, and we were essentially a kind of sized and operated as a task unit under that. So we were named Task Unit Raider, and our job was primarily hunting high value targets, bomb makers, financiers, and malcontents. Right, so we got to do a lot of that, and
so
that was
like a direct action deployment.
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean it was that was nice. That was incredible. I mean it was everybody in the unit was handpicked. I got to pick my team. In fact,
And you're the team leader of this
of I was one
task
of,
unit?
No, there were what we had initially 4 teams.
Okay.
That were going to be 8-man teams, I think, and then we realized that we needed to be a little smaller and more agile, so we broke down into 6 teams ultimately. So I wound up with 4 guys.
Okay.
2 of those guys were out of the Marine Corps, and I was able to call them up and say, "Hey, you guys, you want back in?" And like, "Fuck yeah!" So
The only answer.
yeah. So we had all known quantities from Force Recon. The thing that was I always try to talk about was the intel guys that we had, because I'd never seen I just never had access to really, really great intel guys. And these crew that we had were phenomenal, right? They were I don't think we have time, but there was I will. I'll tell a story just to kind of brag on them a bit. So the first mission that we did when we got there, and we get there, we're rolling into where we're in Baghdad, but there had not been a SEAL team operating there, so there wasn't a whole lot of anybody to really turn over with. So we actually wind up turning over with Jocko.
Oh, no shit.
Wilnick, yeah.
Okay.
And I had deployed with Jocko years before when he was enlisted. So we knew each other. A couple of us knew him, and he gave us all of the intel that he could. But he was on the staff, and this was like his next deployment was his big one, right?
Bruiser. Yeah.
So we get they're like, "Hey, we've got some target packages, but we really don't have a whole lot of information on anything because there hadn't been a unit dedicated to this area." So one thing we did know is one of our intel guys kind of started pulling out reports that there had been a bunch of I think it was 20 translators who had been clipped, right, over a relatively short period of time, just shot in their beds or cars blow up or whatever the case is. So we had interpreters, Iraqi interpreters, right? So he's like, there's got to be something here. So he starts doing his intel shit, right, and just looking for clues and figuring things out, and winds up, and I don't even fully understand how he put everything together, but it was there's this one interpreter that kind of connects all of these people.
Rat.
That's the assumption, right? And it's a woman. So the first mission, and this is wild, but the first U.S. SOCOM mission for Marines was I led it. I had to take a SEAL with me, one of my guys, one of our human Marines, and because of a woman, we had to take a female. So we took this gal, Kate, from the GROM, the Polish Special Forces.
Okay.
And Kate was a absolute badass. Kate
That's awesome.
Killed more people than bone cancer, right? She was one of the snipers. She was cold. Absolutely. But she was, great, funny. And they were working with us, their task unit.
Okay.
So we go drive out, and it seems like it's going to be a morning, right? We drive out to this location where this woman works, for the contract company that she works for, and grab her, right? So we go out there, talk to they're like, oh, she doesn't work here anymore. She works, she's deployed basically to this fire base. So we're like, all right. So, I call on like the big sat phone. I'm like, hey, we're going to proceed. And we're driving in, civilian cars, the middle of the day through Iraq. So we're trying to be as low key as possible. Get out to this next place, and they're like, oh, she doesn't work here. She got like basically fapped out to this other. So we wind up, going all around Baghdad half the day until we get to a location where she had most recently worked. And they're like, oh man, she just quit. All right. And we're like, yeah, this all sounds very, very fishy. All right. So, I kind of schmoozed this army, like legal SGA or whatever that she'd worked for. I'm like, hey man, can you like call her up, see if you can get her to come in and like tell her to pick up her last paycheck, or she left something, whatever. So ultimately she winds up coming in with a guy, drives her in. So we grab them both, take them back to get questioned. And we realized over time that she had been responsible for their deaths, but unwittingly. All right. So she had a friend that was, kind of using her. It was like getting phone lists and things like that. It was like, telling her, hey, we need some interpreters. Can you give me some recommendations of her name? So and she was this old lady, not what you'd expect, but when she finds out that she's been responsible for this, she totally breaks down. I mean, she's like, I've been, but, we're like, well, hey, regardless, you still, kind of really fucked the pooch here. So, we're going to need some, who's this person that you gave this information to? And so that led, to the first direct action mission that we did. And then from there, we wound up, grabbing some, the deck of cards guys and being able to build our own target packages.
Sure.
And it was really on the backs of these, staff sergeant, intel guys who had just wild experience, at NSA, just different places. They were like the best, at their game. Yeah. So they were, always, the shooters, man, we were freaking awesome. We were really, really good, and that was a great time. But what made us successful was the whole
actionable
team.
Intelligence on the ground. Yeah, that's dope. Yeah, and then there's total buy-in to your intelligence, I would assume, after that from the team guys, right? Yeah. Like 100%, you're helping us. Yeah,
and they were. Normally there's not that level of integration. You don't see that. And an intel section in a battalion is generally like so small and overtasked with laminating maps or whatever the hell it is they do that they're not able to. I'm sure they had the capability, and I'm sure that capability has grown. During the 20 years of war, but that was my first time really seeing like how intel can help drive operations, and it was wild over the course of the deployment. And I go into a lot of depth in my book about that we were able to ultimately, when we arrived, what Jocko gave us was like, hey, there's these two blank silhouettes on this targeting board, and we're just calling them X and Z. And nobody knows who they are, who they're associated with, but we know they're big freaking deals. And during the deployment, we're able to get both of those guys.
Oh, yeah.
And one, the last one, Z, that we caught like right at the end was, he had been, people had been after him forever, right? But nobody had been able to identify him or pin him down to any specific location. So with, hugely through our human intelligence folks, they were able to build sources to, put close enough to him to, and that wound up with us going out and grabbing him out of a restaurant in the middle of the day in downtown, Baghdad.
A gunfight ensued? Did you have security?
No, it was, the planning was pretty spot on. It was like, again, civilian vehicles, civilian clothes, and like in so fast that
nobody knew what happened.
Yeah.
Now, what's that like? I've never done anything like that.
It's cool.
It's got to be like because you're about to do this. So, like a lot of my firefight, like I knew I was in bad places, but it was all almost like boom. All right, now we're like almost reactive. a lot of it. Now, there was proactive patrols and stuff, but you don't know when they're going to shoot at you
Right.
or what you're going to find. In this instance, you got a package, you know where a dude is, it's going on, it's happening. There's, what's that like?
Yeah, there's definitely, one of the things that I constantly preach is that I don't know if I learned it then or before, but box breathing, right? Like when you're in the vehicle driving to the objective, if you allow it to, your heart will get out of control.
Yeah.
Your heart rate pumps up, and it, I don't know who, but just like breathing in, in for 4 seconds, holding it for 4, out for 4, holding it for 4, and just kind of repeated.
It's a deep
cycles
belly
of
breathing
that.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Just to calm yourself down. And that's the, one of the things I've found interesting is, when you work with an infantry unit, it's kind of like the linemen on a football team, right? They know they're getting ready to go get in some shit. They, quite often it's like heavy metal going and I want to get freaking jacked up, right? I want to be like smash, right?
Yeah.
The when really what makes a lot more sense is instead of Viking death metal, it's like Frank Sinatra, man, and just
tone it down.
Out. Yeah. And you really want to be going into a fight as calm as possible because of all the things you talked about, auditory exclusion, the blood shunting, the perceptual narrowing, all of these things start to become critical, as your heart rate gets elevated. So it was weird to watch, and I don't think anybody taught us that. I think it was something that we were just older. I mean, a little bit. Most of us were older guys.
Yeah.
I was a gunny. The other team leaders were master sergeants, and I don't think we had some sergeants, but they were pretty senior. And so I think kind of over time, it's just been something that you're like, hey man, instead of getting banging our head against the wall before we go out, let's take time,
bring it down,
read, do whatever it is that kind of chills you out before we jump in the vehicles. And so that was, I think, critical to one, make sure that you can shoot accurately when you have to, and you're not shooting people that you shouldn't be shooting or missing people that you should be shooting. But we had a lot of crazy adventures, right? Like a lot of times, it would be like 3-4 hits in a night. Just go after somebody, and they like, no, he's over there, or there's UAS is like there's a squirter that's running over here, and so we go hit another building. So it was, but they were all well planned out targets that intel guys that identified, and we had been looking at for a while. So that's a totally different. Totally different fight than we were. So I led a team in a JOF in 2004 that was a little bit like that. I mean, that you got the mighty army, 400 meters away from you, and we were primarily a sniper team and JTAGs, right? But you don't know when shit's going to kick off,
right?
And that's a whole different level of stress, and
it's different. I don't know if it's more stress. Like, what do you think's more stressful?
I don't know. I mean, they both are
just different.
Yeah, different. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it definitely. I think that like Fallujah as a fight, or as particularly when you're in a grunt unit, because one of the benefits that we had was, we had a ton of information, like all of us, before we, so just, when you're operating with less information, you don't know necessarily why you're doing it or how you're doing it. And a lot of that comes down to leaders, doing their job and making sure they push down information. But, I don't know. I think it's just different.
Yeah.
One's not necessarily more or less stressful.
Just different kind of stress. Yeah, I'm tracking. Okay, now explain this to me. That's Det One. You go on a deployment. It sounds like you succeed in what they wanted you to do. When you come back from that, is that when when indoctrinate, like the indocs start getting built and ANS and such? Because that wasn't established before you went, was it?
No. So MARSOC did not exist yet. So we come back 2004. We weren't sure what our fate was going to be, right? So we continued to train. We thought that we would kind of split, like an atom or whatever, and half of us would form a second det and build that way. But ultimately, the decision was that MARSOC would stand up as its own organization. So we disbanded. Like, we had like a flag folding thing, and they're like, all right, the Det One doesn't exist anymore. MARSOC does exist, and it's based out of Lejeune here. They essentially took First Force Recon Company and made that what became First Raider Battalion.
Okay.
It was initially called First Special Operations Battalion. Second Force Recon became Second Battalion, and then another unit that was based out of here that had a lot of fast guys in it was called the Marine Special Operations Advisory, or initially it was called the Foreign Military Training Unit. And they designated it as the Marine Special Operations Advisory Group, ultimately the 3rd Battalion.
Okay.
So it was a little bit of consternation because you had 2 Force Recon companies, and then you had these other guys who were not, right? But they're early on, their mission was a little bit like more of advise and assist, while the 2 battalions were focused a lot more kinetic operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, so not everybody who was in, we had a lot of senior guys in the Det. So a lot of guys retired, a lot of guys, got out or did whatever. It wasn't like an open invitation necessarily,
right,
for us to, have an immediate role in MARSOC. I sought it out. I was like, this is obviously the way things are going. This is kind of what, the culmination of all the work that we put into it.
Yeah.
Right. So I got orders to come out here. And other than infantry school, I had never set foot on Lejeune in my, at this point, 18 years.
Oh, bless you.
19
Bless
years.
you.
Yeah. And it hadn't changed much, right? Yeah. Since I was here as a young lad. But so I came out to help get the school started. And at the point that it didn't even exist, right?
Yeah.
So I came out initially as the head CQB instructor, and then just kind of quickly rolled into being the ops chief, and then ultimately I got tasked with building ITC, the course that operators go through.
Okay.
So that I kind of ran that side of it, or helped run that side of it. Other people established the assessment and selection program, and it was the phrase used in the early days was like trying to paint a car that's going 80 miles an hour. We're deploying guys, but we're training them. Some people were just kind of slapped on the back and said, "Hey, you're a special operations guy." We had some people coming from outside of the Force Recon or special operations world, and a lot of like officers are just getting assigned that, hey, you now need to run special operations, and then a lot of the Marine Corps really still isn't very pleased about this. So they're either, you always have to kind of question some of the senior leaders' intentions, right? Some of them I think, we're showing up with kind of guidance that, hey, it would be better if this organization didn't exist.
Really?
There was a lot of...
Why do you think it is? Does the Marine Corps just say, hey, there's nothing special, we don't do special, you guys can do special? What is it?
I think that's a part of it, right? It's just our culture, right? We are special. And that's
special in our own right, yeah.
Yeah, and that's, that was what... It was fascinating. Through this, I got to spend a lot of time with World War II Raiders, and they, fought really, really hard for the, MARSOC to take on the name, the Marine Raiders.
Okay.
And I've been the editor of the Raider Association magazine since like 2016. So because of that, I've had some really amazing opportunities to spend time with the World War II Raiders that still live, and back then, when they started up, there was all this animosity. The Marine Corps absolutely didn't want it, right? But they got told, by the Secretary of War, is what he was called at the time, which was pretty badass, right? Or the Chief of Naval Operations or whatever, like, hey, you guys are going to do this. So they did it for 2 years, and as soon as they could get rid of the Raiders, they did, because I think part of it is not wanting anyone to think that they're special. As soon as you do that, then you got to have prima donnas. And, and if you're special, then I thought I was special too, right? So we have issues with that, right? What that means, and it's if I tell people this all the time, if I had the opportunity to go back in time, and I would call it like U.S. Different Operations Command, right? I think the idea that we're calling it Special Operations caused a lot of consternation that really needn't be there, and I think it. The other aspect of it is, as Marines, we've never been really eager to give up command of our forces, and that's essentially what everybody in SOCOM executes missions, or everybody in MARSOC executes missions at the behest of the SOCOM commander and the theater special operations commands, right? So they're
like
not,
TACCON is
they're
completely
not
over there to them.
They're not answering to the Marine Corps operationally. So that's a part of it. I mean, I think we've it's been what 15
coming on 20
years now.
When was it officially?
In 2006, February 24th, I think, 2006. So that is when they stood up. I think we deployed the first company in 2006, and then it's kind of the cycle is just gone. It's grown. It's been really fascinating to be a part of it.
That's awesome. So from the beginning all the way through, you're still with them, right? You're still working with them.
So I retired in 2008, and I was reluctant. I was really, really reluctant to do that. Yeah. But I would have been. So I was a master sergeant when I retired, and I was going to be selected for master guns. Like that was known, right? That was like just my on the lineal list. I was
there.
And at the time, there were not very many, and I would have been promoted as an 0321, a recon Marine, and I was going to go back to. It looked, reading the tea leaves, I was going to go back to California.
I see what you're saying.
And I had got out here, kind of promised the wife that this was, we were settling down, we bought a house, all of this. So, and I really I wanted to continue to be able to be a part of the, MARSOC.
Now, did you know, though, at that time that was going to be available to you, other than, Vice staying in?
I wasn't 100% sure, but I was pretty sure. Like it was part of my job was to write the position descriptions for the civilians that were going to get hired. So I had I had a level of special operations experience really that no other Marine had at that point, or very few other Marines had. So it was. And I was largely doing the same job, right? I kind of moved into a director of training and education role. So it was a little bit of a gamble, but it was a gamble I was willing to take to stay there. And if not, I had some like backup plans at the time. The contracting thing was crazy money. There was it was a good time to be job hunting. So I figured if this doesn't pan out the way I hope that it does, and luckily it did. Yeah. So I was able to, take off for 2 weeks and come back spend my terminal leave working, in largely the same job that I'd had. And
that's beautiful.
It's, we've gotten a lot bigger, over the years. Yeah. The role of, kind of my scope of my job has meant that I don't get to do as much cool shit as I would like, or as I used to, but it's it's wildly rewarding to be able to I get one of the coolest things that I get to do is talk to like all of the students that come through the training pipelines, about combat mindset and about like the ethos and what it means to be a Raider, and leadership and all of those things. So that's wild.
That's very rewarding to be able to do that, to give back like that after you've been, a SME for so long and gaining the experience. I think, a lot of my purpose derives from that. Like I get a lot of purpose out of the CK work, going and helping shooters get better and such like that. And like one of the main questions, that I end or topics that I end my show on generally, which would have been coming up for you, would be the transition piece. But I would assume that having moved into that as a civilian and maintaining that line of, or that same trajectory with the relatively the same organization and the same people, probably would help immensely in transition. But you tell me, was transition out still tough, or?
No, it was. I think for me it was odd, right? I tell people all the time. I do. There's an organization I work with called the Honor Foundation that helps transition for special operations folks, and so they go to it. It's kind of like a. It's kind of been described as a little mini MBA, right? They talk to them a lot about business, how to start business, how to do things, and I volunteer as a coach for them. And a big part of it is, hey, share your transition experience with the guy that you're mentoring. And I'm like, man, I didn't even realize that I really transitioned. I finally got, after 4 or 5 years in the job, I was like, you know what, I've got to stop treating it like I'm still in, right? I just got to stop coming in at 5 and leaving at 2000, and I'm not being paid for, this is a job, and I love it, and it's a great job, and I'll, obviously do whatever it takes to make guys successful, but I've got to, realize that I'm a civilian and I have a role, and that's different than the role that I've been filling. So I think, part of it, and I've said this before, is that I think when I started going back to school and started like interacting with other people, because until then I really never, I didn't have any friends that weren't Marines. My family didn't have any, if you live around here, most of the kids that your kids play with or whatever, their dads are Marines or their moms or sailors or something. So it, until I did that, I'd never really been around civilians, So that was kind of the transition for me when I was like, wait a minute, I'm different than these people.
Yeah.
But it's time for me to recognize that I am one of these people. I'm a civilian. And that means, certainly, and I tell guys, I think where a lot of people have problems was when they had difficulty with that transition. And hey, brother, you were in for 4 or 8 or 20, 30 years. You're not anymore. And, you
establishing who you are without that, it can be challenging for guys. Yeah.
And it's, if you can't do that, you're going to have problems.
Yeah.
Right. You're now nobody wants to say a civilian, but you're a citizen, right? Be a good freaking American citizen, and you've got so much to offer, right? With everything that you've learned, all of the, it's well recognized. I think that employers do well to hire, people with military experience, and especially Marine Corps experience, in my opinion, right? Because we're just more badasses.
And I think they know that.
Yeah,
they keep hiring them.
But you've got to take the uniform off, take your, drop your ruck, or at least in some way. I hate saying that because I don't mean, stop doing the things that got you to where you were successfully, but you've got to kind of
understand your place on the field.
Take the body armor off, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, I can't live in condition 1 all the time anymore. That's not going to lead to success, or in the red. I can't be in the red all the time. So.
Sure. I think that's wisdom coming from somebody with white on their face, right? So because a lot of people don't like to realize that, but you don't want to be told when you're 25 and hitting that you need to sleep and you need to pay attention to what you eat, and maybe you shouldn't drink as much and you shouldn't probably go party. Nobody wants to hear that as a warfighter growing up in a warfighting age. They want to hear that you're wide open and let's do it, and we're deploying again, so we don't know when we're getting it. I wish I would have took that more serious when my elders were trying to pass wisdom to me.
Yeah, I talk about this. I talk about this, no lie, to probably 1,000 Marines a year, right? That's probably pretty conservative, right? Either individually or in large groups. And I've become a massive proponent of what I call the 6 lines of effort, and it's body, mind, spirit, your purpose or your passion, whatever it is that you love to do, your relationships and responsibilities. And those, the biggest one, and it's got to be the biggest one, is the body, man. If you're sleep, nutrition, and exercise, if you're not doing those three things, you're screwing yourself, right? And if you're not doing them well, but I don't think, you know, the other side of that is that, you know, when you're young, you aren't going to listen. I kind of had to realize that you, and maybe you shouldn't, right?
Maybe.
There's value in burning it down and, you know, all night, and then getting up and doing PT in the morning and hating life and saying you'll never do it again and then doing it again
The next night.
right? There's some of that. Some of that's you're building mental toughness, and, and a lot of it's, you know, there's stupidity in it as well. But you know, you're doing what you know, you're kind of creating that 20-mile ruck thing. You know, you're building this level of resilience and
well, that's maybe that's true. Not maybe. I think it is true.
It is. I mean, I do think that you know, we're a little bit, in some ways, worse off because of our reliance on, you know, hey, you know, we used to, and there's, you know, I've almost reluctant to say it, but I mean, there's value in playing hurt. You know, there's value in getting up and smashing it in the gym, you know, every day till you can't move, and then going out and training and not sleeping and getting liquored up and all of these things. You know, at a certain point, that value, you know, wears off, and at a certain point, you know, what I'm kind of at the point now where I've, you know, I used to have the mindset that, hey, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to just crush it, right? And I'll crush it as long as I can, and then I'll be broken, right? And if you do that, you know, that's certainly one way of looking at it, but that being broken is probably going to happen at like 60, and then you're fucked, you know?
Yeah.
The other way of looking at it is, you know, when I'm, you know, which is very hard to see 85 from 25, right?
Yeah.
You know, when you start to get my age, you're like, man, when I'm 85, I still want to be able to like go out and don't want to ruck and go for a hike in the mountains. I want to go to travel the world and do all these things. So if I want to be able to do that, I've got to change the way that I work out and sleep and eat. And
you got to look out for your older self.
You got to start, you know, identifying that there's going to be a curve, right? You're going to start dropping off in capability. So if I want to, you know, if you're like, hey, I want to be able to pick up my grandkids when I have them and swing them around, then, you know, you better start doing overhead presses now. You better start doing the things that are going to lend, you know, that level of strength or flexibility or endurance or whatever it is, which now I'm like an old man talk, right? But I've got to start thinking more of that way. And and I'm fortunate that, you know, the leaders that I had required me to build this reservoir of toughness.
Sure.
It's still there, right? Sometimes you gotta like clean the all the leaves and
wipe
shit
it
out
down.
of the well, right? And dig a little bit to get clear water coming. But it's dug. I mean, it was, you know, that well was dug by, you know, some of the best Marines I've ever known, right? They just crushed me when I needed to be crushed.
That's right.
But also, you know, we're great leaders and taught me, and so I've been very fortunate in that regard.
Oh yeah. Got a couple more things I want to talk about, and then we'll close this out. But Tough Rugged Bastards, tell me about it. Tell me when we can expect it. You've mentioned it, you know, a couple times in the interview so far. Give me a brief synopsis and when it's going to come out.
All right. So it is a book that essentially is a memoir that covers, I mean, a lot of what we talked about today, but it's primarily Det One and in the early days of MARSOC. And it's not a history book, right? It's just kind of through my eyes, the things I remembered and kind of the way I saw them. And I talk a lot about it in there that, you know, one of the things that, you know, combat is a very individual experience. So the thing that I experience might be different than the things you experience, even if you were right beside me.
Yep.
So I make sure to make you know, I'm not claiming to talk for anybody else. I do, you know, really tout all of the great Marines I've worked with, but it's my story. You know, I try to tell it in a way that's informative. You know, hopefully, you know, young guys can read it and get lessons out of it. hopefully, it's funny at points. I hope, right? Because there's a lot of funny shit happens in war that people don't talk about.
Oh, yeah.
I tried to write it. I mean, I figure that military people are going to buy it. All right, hopefully they will. I mean, hopefully they'll buy like multiple copies and pass them out. But I try to write it with keeping in mind the perspective of a civilian reading it, and like, hey, what's special operations all about? And what's it, so what I don't, a lot of times I feel like people write memoirs and it's a choice, right? But you're writing it to the brothers, right? And for this, I wanted to kind of open the aperture and say, hey, man, here's what it's like to be in a special operations unit. Here's what it's like to have like imposter syndrome. I talk a lot about that. Like wonder every day that, hey, man, am I good enough? When is somebody going to like recognize that, hey, Dailey, how the fuck did he get in here?
Yeah.
And then coming to terms with that when you're leading guys, you can only afford so much of that. You can't let them see that you're, sometimes unsure of things. And then sometimes you need to, go to a mentor or whatever and be like, hey, man, I've got questions or...
I am unsettled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, we should all, have a coach or mentor or somebody that we can go to with those things. So it covers kind of that whole gamut. I think that maybe interesting thing about it is I started really writing it as part of, I started writing the initial story that got published in a literary magazine a couple of years ago called Consequence. And that was about that Najaf thing. But I really got down to the act of writing it and had a contract with the publisher on about 20 years after, on 2021. Right, so it was kind of the book starts. It's like, I'm going for a walk on September 11th, 2021, thinking back 20 years and how all of the shit that's gone on, good and bad, and so hopefully it's something that's enjoyable to read, and it will be available. The publisher is Permuted Press, but it's distributed by Simon & Schuster. It will be. It's won't be out until August of next year.
Okay.
But
super stoked about that.
Yeah, I'm super stoked too. In the interim, I do, like you've mentioned in the Substack that I have, I keep updates and things. So I write a weekly post that talks about a lot of different things, not strictly military, but kind of the title of it is Think, Read, Write, Repeat. So
I love it, by the way.
That was a moment of inspiration when I thought about it. I'm like, that's pretty good. But what I'm thinking about, and it tries to follow. Each month is kind of a theme. A recommendation of something to read. A recommendation for journaling to write about. And,
sure.
And then some quotes or something. And then there's a monthly kind of roll up that comes out on the last Sunday of the month.
Okay.
But that, it's the letter J, DAILEY.substack.com.
Check it out. I'm definitely I'll make sure I drop a link in the bio and push it out with these episodes. It's something that ever since I talked to Mark and looked at your Substack the first time, I'm like, yep, this is exactly what I want to digest. Like these are the things that I want to digest. And I know I'm not alone in that. You have things from stoicism to regular life to military life to, matter of fact, one of the ones I wanted to talk about was, I think the most recent one on your Substack about the things that are worth it are through the cave.
Yeah.
Do you want to jump into that a little bit? You don't have to verbatim, but just what was on your mind.
Yeah, I think there's the idea of the hero's journey. Are you familiar with that much? So this guy, Joseph Campbell, wrote a book in 1949 called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And he was a professor of literature, and he had studied kind of mythology and stories like across time, across the world, and found that, traditionally they kind of follow a pretty cyclical pattern, and there's certain steps that not all of them hit, but that a lot of them hit. And it probably would have kind of gone into obscurity, like a book that nobody read until 1977, I think 77, and a little movie called Star Wars came out, right? And George Lucas said, hey, I wrote Star Wars based on this hero's journey methodology, right? And in a nutshell, it says that every kind of great story, hero story. And I'm not a big Star Wars fan, but I don't know what's wrong with me.
I've never seen them.
No, okay. So
I hear people talk about them like with extreme zeal, and I'm like, I've never seen.
Well,
one
we
of them,
won't talk Star Wars because I would probably screw something up anyway. But generally speaking, there's the person that wakes up in the morning and they're like, "Hey, man, I wish my life were more exciting than it is." And then something happens that offers the promise of excitement or adventure, and they're like, "Oh, whoa, no, I'd rather not." And then something else happens that kind of thrusts them out of the ordinary world into the extraordinary world, right? Is what he calls it. And usually there's a mentor, like somebody that trains them, and they kind of win some, they lose some, and then ultimately they come to the kind of the low point, and it's the big battle, right? And it's what he called, Campbell called the innermost cave. And it's really, it's the reason that this story has existed, for thousands of years since people started telling stories is because it's kind of like a cycle of our day, right?
Yeah.
Every fucking day we wake up and we have the chance to do something awesome, or we have the chance to sit on our ass on the couch. And the only way that we're really going to get better is by facing the thing that we're most afraid of, right? That's the cave. And that's the monster, whatever it is. It's kind of like this thing. You go into the cave and, realize that the monster is yourself, right? And so once you kind of slay yourself, then, a new, better you emerges, right?
Yep.
And if you can kind of go through that cycle every day, right? And it doesn't have to be an awesome adventure or, maybe it's just getting off your ass and going to the gym, right? Maybe that's the thing, the cave for today. But, and then when you come back, you've got to come back into the ordinary world, and you come back at a little bit higher plane, right? So now you've got some knowledge that you didn't have before, or some power or whatever. So any, Harry Potter, freaking Mulan, any Disney movie, any hero movie, any freaking Braveheart, right? And they all kind of follow these things. They get to the point where they've got to fight the final battle, and then, they gain something from it. And so that's what I talked about in that last issue or the episode was that's what you're facing is your biggest fear. And just the fact of stepping into the cave and facing that fear is kind of how you win the battle.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I loved it. I actually listened to him. I read along as I listen, but it's awesome. And then I've taken and journaled, some of my own thoughts, which is, I don't know how many people do it, but you should. For my daily routine, I want to read, I want to write, and I want to meditate at some point in the morning. Usually that's how I start off. Don't always get to, depending if I'm moving or traveling or whatever. But I think it's a sound way to get your box between the ears right as you start your day. And I also looked at, it's funny, not funny, but it's fitting that you mention the hero's story and rising to the occasion on a daily basis. There's I really kind of fed up with public school. I shouldn't be, because it does provide, good socialism or social aspects and socializes kids good.
Probably some good socialism too.
Probably some of that too. I was looking at private and homeschool programs for my children, and I started listening to this podcast, and this guy was talking about this program that he developed for homeschooling, for situations like this, for people who are kind of fed up with that. And their entire day and week is constructed around a hero's rise to the challenge. And so every morning they start off, whether it's like you're doing it virtually, the kids home virtually, doing school, or if there's in one of these settings, there's not many of them, according to those people just yet, but they do a lot virtually. But they set the student in third grade on a hero's path in the very beginning of the day. And when I read that, I'm like, that's right. That's it. In my mind, that's right. To build that, show them this is what you're learning today, and this is why you need to learn it, and this is what's going to happen throughout your life in a cyclical pattern. And the earlier that you can teach a kid that, I think the better.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're putting it out there for adults and openly putting it out there for people to digest, I think is beautiful.
Yeah, I think kids can absolutely understand it because, like I said, every time they sit down and watch a movie, they're seeing it. Right?
They're watching it,
seeing
already.
It play out. So, and it definitely, hopefully, makes the point that adversity's okay. I think a lot of times we try to eliminate that. From because we want to protect the children. And yes, we need to protect our children, but we need to let them fall down and get bloodied sometimes too. And I think sometimes that gets lost a little bit because you can't. There's I think it may have been in that one, the quote at the very end, or it may have been the week before, but there was a quote from I don't even know who it was. It wasn't Joseph Campbell, but it might have been Epictetus. I think it was Epictetus, and he said, Hercules wouldn't have been Hercules if he didn't have the Hydra, and the boar and all these things to fight. Like he would have been some jack dude that slept all day, right? Because then maybe he wouldn't have been jacked, right? Because there wouldn't have been a reason to work out.
To be jacked.
He would have, he was only a hero because there were bad guys to fight. He was only a hero because they were evil, and only a hero because he got his ass kicked once in a while, and only a hero because he had to put out, right? And that's, again, it goes back to rucking 20 miles and doing tug of war, right? You got to do hard things. And even if those are manufactured, difficulties like the Spartan races or whatever, getting kids involved early in whatever physical activity, jiu-jitsu, things where they're going to get a black eye or a bruise or a bloody nose and learn lessons on the way, learn teamwork, learn citizenship. Are all good.
Yeah,
and
100%.
valuable.
100%. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about?
I think we've talked about
a lot.
Mostly everything, haven't we?
I think so. I still look forward to when your book comes out. I want to read, digest, and then maybe talk about that.
I would love
on an
to,
episode. Get it out there for people. Yeah.
And you know how it is. I'll be trying to make the podcast circuit to the greatest extent possible.
Well, you need to get somebody you served with in the past. You get up on that one, then that book will get seen by a lot more people. I think.
Hopefully, he's listening.
I would hope so too. Well, listen, John, I appreciate you coming out. I appreciate the depth and transparency that you've put through. I know that there's going to be people that are watching this that there's several gems to take away. Always be what's it say? Always be weary of an old man in a young man's game. You're the old man in a young man's game, and I appreciate what you've done for the Marine Corps. I appreciate what you've done for the MARSOC community. That's a community that I've always held to a high reverence in my life. I like that. I wanted to go there. Didn't quite get there. I wouldn't do anything in my career differently. But I always respected a small unit level of elite fighters who all had to sacrifice to get where they were. I'm always in the infantry Marine Corps where sometimes you're going to have guys that didn't want to be there and they were there anyway, and they don't care.
Yeah.
And at least in a SOCOM style unit, you can, there might be shitbags. I'm not going to say there's not their 10%, but everybody had to sacrifice and put out just to get there. What they do after that, is whatever. But I always had the appreciation for that. So I appreciate what you did with, Det One and starting that and manufacturing a wholesome unit that is able to, go downrange and do what they do. And still to this day, I mean, that's been a minute ago and they're still doing what they need to do and they're still doing it well. So I appreciate that. With that, I think we'll close it out, guys. I appreciate you coming to Choices Not Chances. This was a great one, a little bit longer than our normal episode. But if you've watched it to this point, you know why, and you know the depth of what we're going to get out of that. So appreciate you. If you've seen anything during this show that hits you, resonates, and that you need, needs to be heard, and who needs to hear it, share it out. Don't be selfish with the information, and we'll get better together. Until next time, it's Ryan. Choices Not Chances, guys.
Well, that concludes this episode. Thanks for listening to Choices Not Chances podcast. Please share, like, and subscribe wherever you listen or watch our podcast. You can also follow us on social media at Choices Not Chances podcast. Thanks, and have a great day.
Louisiana Gun Shop, your firearm headquarters, specializing in concealed carry guns, ammo, and training. You can get your Louisiana permit with us. Also a large selection of AR-15s, or if you are that build-it-yourself type of guy or gal, we have all the parts to build and customize your own AR-15. Glock, SIG, Taurus, Ruger. We have all the brands, both in the store or at LouisianaGunShop.com.
Not too far. You're marking a building. Hit him. Yeah, that's good. That's a good shot. That's money. Yeah.